members for this half-a-day seminar. As you all know, every member, whether is in practice or in service, have to comply with the Code of Ethics. Now, the 11th edition of Code of Ethics has introduced HIFAC ethical standards also. It's a high time we should all know Code of Ethics every bit, because we have to maintain the accounting ethics of our profession, maintain the quality of our profession. We should understand, and even HO says also we should have at least one program every month. Even in the angle of CPE also, compulsory every member should do 2 hours of CPE program on ethical standards. Apart from that, NAFRA has been introduced. Lot of disciplinary proceedings taking faster. We should be very careful, and we should know every aspect of our code of ethics and how disciplinary mechanism is working. To enlighten us on this topic, we have two Central Council members to address us and make our knowledge enrichable on this aspect. With this, I welcome you all for this half-a-day seminar. I request our Secretary Pramod to give a brief introduction of both the leaders of our Central Council members. Over to Pramod.
Thank you, Chairman. Firstly, I would like to take the privilege in introducing Mangesh P. Kinare, sir, who is the current Central Council member. He is serving his second term in the Central Council, and he is the chairman of the two important committees of ICI, which is the Ethical Standards Board and the Valuation Standards Board. He is also the vice chairman of the Audit Committee of ICI and member of One Bench Disciplinary Committee. He is also the member of various important committees of ICI, including Board of Studies, Auditing and Assurance Standards Board, Expert Advisory Committee, GST Committee, Management Committee, Infrastructure Committee, etc. He is also a prolific speaker on ICI and other forums on varied topics of ICI Code of Ethics, GST, bank audit, economy, and related subjects like Atmanirbhar Bharat, Union Budget, etc. He's also written many articles in newspaper and appeared on television channels as expert on Union Budget and GST. Socially, also very active on various forums. He was also the chairman of the Western India Regional Council of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India in the year 2013 and 2014. With this brief introduction, I would like to welcome you again, sir. I would also like to take the privilege in introducing our own Central Council member. Of course, we don't need any introduction of him in Bangalore, especially, but who is also a dedicated, as we know, in South India, at least in Bangalore. He has already served more than 2 decades in the Bangalore branch. He has served his chairmanship and also in the Regional Council SIRC. He is also the Vice Chairman of Valuation Standards Board currently in the Central Council. He is also the Vice Chairman of Committee of International Taxation and Deputy Convener Publication and CDS Directorate. Of course, I'm giving a very brief introduction of Cotha Srinivas because our own members know him personally, and I'm not taking much of his time, and we know his contribution, what has done to the profession. With these brief introduction, I welcome both of the speakers onto the dais, and I would like to hand it over to you, sir.
We are unable to hear, sir. Kotha, sir.
Mangesh.
I think there is some technical glitch in there, sir.
in connecting to Mr. Mangesh sir. Am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes, you are.
Okay, okay. Uh,
We can start, I think, sir. Not audible, sir. Cotha, sir, not audible.
no, they unmuted me. Okay.
Yeah, yes.
Now is it audible?
Yes.
Okay.
Members. Manish.
It's okay.
Manish.
Okay.
Visible, sir.
Visible, na?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So let me start with the code of ethics. So today we are speaking on code of ethics and other related issues with respect to code of ethics. In fact, as chairman said, it is one of the important topic for members to know something about the code of ethics. I'll be taking you through this basics of code of ethics maybe for 1 hour or 45 minutes to 1 hour. Then we have Mangesh sir who will be taking us through some of the important case laws or some of the happenings in the disciplinary committee as such. So what is that we are going to discuss today? So topics for today's discussion, I'll be speaking on meaning of code and ethics, then difference between law and ethics. Then let us try to understand some of the different types of ethical values. Then the Chartered Accountants Act 1949. Then code of ethics, its necessity. What is the necessity of code of ethics? Then fundamental principles of professional ethics. Then threats to professional independence and schedules to the act. And also finally, some of the important aspects of disciplinary directorate. Of course, before taking you to the next slide, let me also thank the Ethical Standards Board, which has organized this particular program, and also the Bangalore branch, who had come forward to host this particular program in the interest and the larger interest of the members. So let me take you through something called meaning of code and ethics. What is this code? Of course, the definition, it says code, it is defined as programming instructions. In fact, we would have heard this word code with respect to software developments or software programming, where it has been a codified language. So it's a system of words, letters, or signs used to represent a message in secret form, or a system of numbers, letters, or signals used to represent something in a shorter or more convenient form. But when we talk about code of ethics, there is other meaning of code, or what we can say is like it is a written code where every person has to follow that. So that is what we would like to understand with respect to the meaning of code, with respect to code of ethics. Then what is ethics? These are moral principles that governs a person's behavior or the conducting of an activity. So one is code of ethics. Then we also have something called moral values and ethical values as such. So it's a branch of knowledge that deals with moral principles. In fact, do we need a code of ethics is the next one of the slides I'll say. Basically, I would like to say that each and every one of us are having these moral values from our childhood. Because if you see the Indian mythology, you would have learned about Ramayana, you would have learned about Mahabharata and also Bhagavad Gita, where a lot of moral values will be taught in those epics as such. So a CA, either in practice or service, has to abide by ethical behavior. Beyond this code of ethics, also there's something called ethical behavior, where each and every one of us should follow that and abide by the ethical behaviors. The code of ethics establishes ethical requirements for professional accountants. Then let us understand the difference between law and ethics. What is law and what is ethics? So law, it is defined as systematic body of rules that governs a whole society and actions. If I have to talk about income tax law, it includes Income Tax Act, income tax rules, and other notifications and circulars and case laws as such. So it's a It is defined as systematic body of rules that governs the whole society and actions. Then what do we understand by the word ethics? Ethics means the science of standard human conduct. So certain of the ethics may not be defined in the law, but it's the general or normal behavior of a standard human conduct. Then law consists of rules and regulations. As I said, as I gave an example of Income Tax Act, it has got a act, rules, regulations, something like that. But in case of ethics, it comprises of guidelines and principles that inform people about how to live and behave. So it is not a codified law as such, ethics, but it is a guidelines and principles that inform people about how to live and behave. And this law is created by government, maybe the local government, the regional, national, or multinational government. So we have various laws which has been done by the state governments, or the central government law is there, or sometimes we have even international laws also. Ethics are governed by individual legal or professional norms, that is workplace ethics, environment ethics, etc. What happens if there is a breach of law? It may result in punishment or penalty, or sometimes both. But what happens to the breach of ethics? Not in this case. So there may not be breach. I mean, so breach of ethics may not result in punishment or penalty, or both. I'm not talking about code of ethics. I'm generally talking about ethics. Then what is the objective of law? Is to maintain social order and peace, and also to protect all the citizens. Then what is the objective of codes? Ethics. These are code of conduct that helps a person to decide what is right or wrong and how to act. And law creates a legal binding, but ethics has no such binding on the people. So there are so many ethical values which is not defined in the law, but still we continue to practice that. Just to give an example, there is no law which says that son has to listen to his father. But if you go to Ramayana, when Ram, if you see the behavior of Ram as a son, he listens to his parents. He respects the parents, and he takes that word in letter and spirit. Whatever the father says, whatever mother says, he with the letter and spirit, he follows that without even raising a question. So these are some of the ethical values we would have learned from childhood, but that may not be in the law as such. So this is some of the difference I could say between law and ethics. Then what are the different types of ethical values? So we have just listed down some of the ethical values. One is the business ethics, there may be personal ethics, the professional ethics, religious ethics, and social ethics as such. What is business ethics? So it's to give an example of business ethics, it talks about selling of any product which has got over the expiry date. So if you go to a businessman, even though we may say in Sanskrit, Vyaparam Droha Chintanam, but it doesn't mean that you have to keep on doing wrong things to the customers as such. We say customer is God. So selling of a product which has got over the expiry date is not a business ethics. So it is a study of good and evil, right and wrong, just and unjust actions in the business. Then personal ethics. So it includes personal values and moral qualities. Like example, believe in racism is morally wrong. So there may be so many examples for this personal ethics. Say today when we see a lot of things, like if you open a newspaper today, a lot of crimes are happening. So these are all not personal ethics as such. This is not the value system that has been developed in this country or culture of this country. But when once you open a newspaper, you get a lot of news where the crime is happening, especially on women and all those things. So these are all personal ethics where you should have personal values and moral qualities as such. Then comes the professional ethics. As I said, in business, even we have professional ethics, encompass the personal and corporate standards behavior expected by professional. So one is to give an example, misleading clients knowingly to have financial advantage. So when we are doing service to the clients, of course, we are not only giving service to the client, also we are as a extended arm to the government. So we should educate the clients in such a way that they pay proper taxes and they maintain books of accounts properly. But if there is any act which misleads the clients knowingly to have some financial advantage, that's not part of professional ethics as such. Then religious ethics. Most religion have an ethical component often derived from purported supernatural elevation or guidance, like you shouldn't enter temple with shoes. So like that, just to give an example, that we cannot enter temple or any other workplace with shoes, so that you have to maintain that cleanliness and sanctity of that particular place. These are all some of the religious ethics which has been imbibed in us. Then social ethics. Example, the usual way things are done here. So what is the usual practices done in a particular society? That is the social ethics. Say suppose there is a signal where a green light is there, you have to move. When red light comes, you have to stop. But what happens, we would have seen, even if red light is there, some of the people will keep moving. So that is not ethics. So it's not a social ethics. That's not a right actions on part of a citizens as such. So these are some of the different types of ethical values. Then comes this Chartered Accountant Act 1949. Of course, we know this act came into force on 1st of July 1949, and it has been divided into 9 chapters, including chapter 8A, and it has got 2 schedules. A distinguishing mark of a profession is acceptance of its responsibility to the public. So CA profession is one such. So any distinguishing mark of a profession is acceptance of its responsibility to the public. It's not only, I'm not talking about CA profession alone. It may be a profession of a legal profession, it may be, or a medical profession like a doctor. So they have got responsibility to the public, or even if you take a profession of teaching. So CA profession is also one such profession where we have responsibility to the public as such. Then chartered accountants as professionals are engaged in building trust to vast variety of users, whether shareholders, government, banks, or others. So we have various stakeholders. Whenever we do a work, we should keep in mind all those stakeholders. So CAs also have some set of code of ethics. This code of ethics establishes ethical requirement for professional accountants. So as I explained to you, there are certain ethical values and moral values. But apart from that, we have also a code of ethics. So where we have codified some of the things, what are the do's and don'ts. So one has to follow, as a chartered accountant, one has to follow all those code of ethics as such. And it applies to a chartered accountant who is either in practice or in service. So both people, whether he is in practice or in service, they have to abide by these ethical behaviors, and any deviation from the ethical responsibilities bring the disciplinary mechanism into action against the CS. So we should be very careful, and we should understand each and every code of ethics, whether the member is in practice or in service. Any deviation in this code of ethics, there may be different types of deviation. One is professional misconduct, the other one may be other misconduct, which is not related to the profession as such. So any deviation from this code of ethics, it will be they will be subject to disciplinary mechanism. Then the chartered accountants, I said, it has got 9 chapters and 2 schedules as such. And ICA, being a member of IFAC, that is International Federation of Accountants, has considered the ethics issued by IESBA, that is International Ethical Standards Board for Accountants, while framing the code of ethics for CS. So recently we had this, what you call this code of ethics revised in January 2019, based on 2018 edition of IESBA code of ethics, applicable from 1st of April 2020. So we have 3 volumes of code of ethics published by ICAI. First one is code of ethics revised 2019, and volume 2 talks about code of ethics revised 2020, and volume 3 gives us the case law referencer. So various case laws that has been decided by the disciplinary committee, you have that in volume 3. Then code of ethics, if you just see what are the way it has been designed, part A based on IESBA code of ethics 2005 edition, and part B based on domestic Indian provisions. So we have various chapters in this code of ethics. For chapter 1 talks about general application of the code. Then chapter 2 talks about professional accountants in practice. Chapter 3 talks about professional accountants in service. Then chapter 4, accounting and auditing standards, the Chartered Accountant Act 1949, council guidelines and self-regulatory measures recommended by the council. So first and the foremost thing a member has to understand is, like this code of ethics is not very complicated. It will be very simple, provided we follow that in a true spirit, and we do our work in honestly, and maybe truthfully and straightforwardness. So we should be honest to the whatever work we do. Then this code of ethics should not be a major hindrance for us. Apart from being honest and straightforward and truthfulness, we may also have to understand the basic laws of the ICA or laws of the land. So if there is any deviation, you may be honest, but you may not be aware of the laws of the institute. Like one has to know while attest functions have to be done or certification functions has to be done. One has to be thorough with the relevant accounting standards, auditing standards, whatever the guidance notes issued by the ICA. So all those things you should be aware of. And of course, for other misconduct, we should know other laws of the land also. So if we are aware of all those things, according to me, there should not be any problem in doing the professional practice or service. So there will not be any violation of code of ethics as such. This code is in three parts. As I said, part A, fundamental principles of professional ethics, and part B and C illustrates how the conceptual framework is to be applied in specific situation, that is threats and safeguards. The expression professional or other misconduct within the meaning of section 22 of the CA Act shall be deemed to include any acts or omission in any of the two schedules, that is first schedule and second schedule. As I said, there are two schedules to this Chartered Accountants Act. So whenever there is a act of omission, then it will be covering under these two schedules, that is first schedule and second schedule. Many of our members perceive code of ethics as a burden, as I already explained earlier. On the contrary, code of ethics seeks to protect the interests of the profession as a whole. It is a shield that enables us to command respect. So we cannot consider this code of ethics as burden, like we consider TDS as TDS. So this code of ethics is not a burden on anybody's shoulders. But when once you understand this code of ethics, when once you know what are the things that are lying in that, then it is a shield that enables us to command respect. So if you follow a code of ethics in letter and spirit, then it can definitely not a burden, but as I said, it will command respect for each and every professional. What is the code of ethics, whether it's necessary? So as I said, ethics are as old as human civilization. When we talk about Indian mythology, I said we know something about Ramayana, Mahabharata, Bhagavad Gita. So from our childhood, our parents or grandparents will be putting all those moral values in us. It is nothing but the laws or rules of acceptable behavior. So it's a general behavior where the entire society is the way they are behaving. That is the laws and rules, then which we also have to follow that. The whole foundation of any profession, particularly CA profession, is its credibility. Because today, something goes wrong, the first target will be chartered accountant. Whether anywhere anybody would have done a mistake, but they will only point out at the chartered accountant. So the credibility of this profession and the professional will be at stake. So, and the sole purpose of code of ethics is to ensure and uphold this credibility. I can definitely understand with the pressures what we work under the, I should say, the due dates, the guidelines, the guidances. With so much of constraints, we put our best efforts. All our members will put our best efforts. But whatever said and done, whenever you do, you may be filing hundreds of returns. But if you go wrong in one or two returns, that will be highlighted. So that will affect our credibility. So error is human, I can understand. But whatever said and done, whatever the situations are there, still we cannot do something wrong. And all the mistakes cannot be considered as fraud, but there are certain mistakes. If a member is involved in creating a fraud, then that will be a different aspect as such. But every mistake cannot be considered as a fraud, because in the course of doing a lot of work with the pressures and due dates, there may be chances that we may go wrong. But still, we expect each and every one of us to be to the core that as professionals we have to do. The provisions discussed here is to ensure the independence of the members and is not affected while carrying out attest functions. So this independence, we should always keep remembering what is independence. Any attest functions when we have to do, we should not come under any pressure as such. So while seeing these disciplinary cases, we come across various situations where the chartered accountant member would have been under tremendous pressure by client or some other agencies. They may certify certain things, but afterwards it may go wrong. then we cannot help them. So let us have that independence at every point of our execution, I should say. And ethics seeks to protect the interests of the profession as a whole. And for the interest of the profession, the Code of Ethics has been implemented in 2 schedules of the Chartered Accountants Act 1949. So we have Schedule 1 and Schedule 2. So before going into that Schedule 1, let us understand some of the fundamental principles of professional ethics. So what are the fundamental principles of professional ethics? One is integrity. The second one is objectivity. The third one is professional competence and due care. Fourth one is confidentiality, and fifth one talks about professional behavior. So these are some of the fundamental principles of professional ethics, which each and every one of us meaning I am also a chartered accountant, practicing chartered accountant. So members, instead of members, I am saying each and every one of us should follow these fundamental principles. So what is integrity? So it says integrity, objectivity, confidentiality, professional behavior, and all. What do we understand by integrity? So integrity means it imposes an obligation on professional accountants to be straightforward and honest. So earlier also I said, as a chartered accountant, we should be straightforward and honest. But apart from that, whenever we are certifying certain things, like whenever we are attesting or certifying, as we know, we should know all the relevant accounting standards, auditing standards. Apart from the, say, suppose if you are doing this tax audit, apart from Income Tax Act, you should know other regulations, means accounting standards and auditing standards required to certify that particular audit as such. Then objectivity. It imposes an obligation not to compromise their professional judgments because of bias, conflict of interest, or the undue influence of others. So there may be many situations where the member may be biased, or there may be conflict of interest or undue influence. Sometimes we come across certain cases, like to give an example, in one of the case, the authorized capital of the company was 1 lakh, but one of the member had given certificate stating that the authorized capital is 500 lakhs. So from 1 lakh, he had given a certificate as 500 lakhs to the banks. And subsequently, when the bank came to know that it is a wrong certificate, they made a complaint against that member to the disciplinary committee. So while doing that, like the pressure, it may be because of some pressure, like pressure maybe from the bankers or pressure from maybe from the client. We should ensure that proper documents are there. See, as per the balance sheet, it was 1 lakh authorized capital, but they would have certified as 500 lakhs. And even if you go to ROC, there were no other forms that has been filed to increase the authorized capital from 1 lakh to 500 lakhs as such. So these are some of the examples I'm giving. Maybe there may be some cases where they would have given some proposed financial statements, then that may differ with the audited financial statements. So all those things we should be very, very careful. And if you are giving the, what you call this provisional balance sheets, or what do you call this projected balance sheets, your notes should be very clear. So you should be very clear, and your audit report should be very clear that it is from unaudited balance sheets and all those things. Just like that, if you give one projected balance sheet and then give the audited balance sheet where there is a lot of variances, then it will create problem to the members. Then professional competence and due care. This is what I was telling, as to maintain professional knowledge and skills. So you should be abreast with all the latest developments, whether it is with respect to that particular law. Like if you take Income Tax Act, there may be a lot of circulars, notifications, amendments to the act and rules. Similarly, any act you take, GST or Companies Act, we should be updated with the latest changes and whatever happenings in that particular law as such. So for that, like the branches are there, the regional councils and the institute is there, where we conduct a lot of professional education programs. Like this is one of the CPE program. So members should attend that particular CPE programs, get knowledge. And also in their offices, they should have one technical wing where they can sit, and at least once in a week, they should update with whatever the changes that is happening. So professional competence and due care. So one is professional competence, that one has to keep on building this professional competence, and due care. What I'm saying, what I mean due care means, whenever you are doing something, ensure that you have taken due care. See, many times it so happens that a member would have done the audit, but he will not generate UDIN. So he will say after 60 days, he will come and talk to any of the council members, say, sir, we forgot to generate UDIN. So that is not an excuse at all. Before certifying anything, you should generate UDIN, means you should generate UDIN. So there's no question of I file the audit today or finalize the audit today, I'll sign the balance sheet today, but generate UDIN after 60 days, saying that I've got time up to 60 days. I need not postpone that. So all these small things, if you can take care, a lot of problems will be resolved as such. So there won't be any problem at all. Then the next one is confidentiality. Of course, being professionals, we know what is confidentiality, and we have been maintaining this confidentiality, not disclosing the confidential information to outsiders of the customers until unless our clients, until unless there is a legal requirement. So until unless there is a legal requirement, we are not disclosing that. That confidentiality has to be maintained. The last one fundamental principle is professional behavior. So one has to comply with relevant laws and regulations. So relevant laws and regulations, when I say it is not only with respect to the taxation laws, even I told earlier, the laws of the land. So if you are not complying with the relevant laws and regulations, so that also will come under other misconduct. And also to avoid any action that may bring discredit to the profession. If we do something which is not as per the regular taxation acts or other acts, the general act, if you not comply with, if they come to know that you are a chartered accountant, they may say that it may bring discredit to the profession as such. They may not talk about one chartered accountant, that particular member, but they talk about the entire profession. So this also is a professional behavior where we have to ensure that any of our deeds will not bring discredit to the profession as such. So how to have these fundamental principles, or how to follow these fundamental principles of professional ethics? Are there any threats which hinders or affects us to follow these fundamental principles? So threats to the professional independence. So we spoke about professional independence. So what are all the threats? Some of the threats, advocacy threat may be there, something we call as familiarity threat, intimidation threat, self-interest threat, and self-review threat. So what is advocacy threat? Role representing a client or pushing the client's interest to another context. So like there may be a situation where advocacy threat, where you are filing a return, and also we are appearing before the appellate authorities, or you may be involved in something like preparation of the documents for IPO, where the company is raising the money, and then you may have afterwards you may give certificates which is not in line with whatever you have done, like that. So there may be some advocacy threat on those issues. Then familiarity threat. So familiarity threat means, like, if you know a particular client created where due to relationship client is in a position to influence the work of a CEO. So like there are certain interests, right? Maybe financial interest or non-financial interest in a particular entity, and you being a chartered accountant or an auditor, so there may be a familiarity threat. So usually we avoid doing the audits of a particular entity where you have familiarity threat, or you have what you call this interest in that particular entity as such. Then intimidation threat created where someone can exercise disproportionate pressure by being in a position of power and influence. So if we are doing, if our clients are people who have got in power, I should say, or the influential people, then there may be some intimidation threat. So they may put you under certain pressure, so which it may affect your professional independence. So this is one of the threat, intimidation threat, where you will be under professional independence because you are handling certain people who have got influence or power. Or it may be cases where it's a very big client. He may say, if you don't do this, I will not give some other work. Something like that also may be there. It's not just when you are working with people with power and influence. Maybe you may have a very big client where you need not miss out that particular client. So sometimes you may say, you may need not exercise your professional independence. So that is intimidation threat. Then self-interest threat, of course, the same, similar to that, where the CA has vested interest in outcome over which the CA has some degree of influence or control. It is not limited to purely financial interest. So if any of your relatives have an entity and you have some interest, whether it is financial interest or some other thing, then it is considered as self-interest threat. And self-review threat, created when a CA is called on to check, audit, or approve a piece of work he was involved in originating. So this is to give an example where a chartered accountant is preparing books of accounts, he should not do the audits of that particular books of account. We call it as a concept called maker and checker. So a person who makes, he should not check. So there should be another person to validate that. So whenever you're preparing the books of accounts, you should not do the audit of such books of accounts. But practically, it's very difficult that small and very, very small and medium enterprises, it will be very difficult where they will go for different chartered accountants for one for accounting, one for auditing, one for filing GST returns and all. But since we have this self-review threat, that is maker and checker, so as far as possible, our suggestion is that if you are doing accounting, you should not do audit. So maybe you may have to employ other chartered accountant for doing the audit of the books of accounts. So these are examples for threats. Advocacy threat. SCA may be asked to promote client securities as part of IPO. CA should not make false or misleading statements or present his judgment as fact, thus avoiding advocacy threat. So this is also there. And the other one is like when once you file your return, you are also representing that. That also they may say some of the cases where it may amount to advocacy threat. Familiarity threat. The spouse of the CA auditor is the CEO in the client company. Then intimidation threat, as I explained earlier, a large client, audit client indicates that it will not award planned non-attest services to the audit firm if the latter continues to disagree with client's accounting treatment for a particular transaction. Self-interest threat, when a CA holds direct financial or non-financial interest in the client or obtains a material loan from the client. And self-review threat, a CA is asked to audit the books of accounts which has been prepared by him. This is the example I gave. And one more thing I can tell is intimidation threat. Sometimes, of course, I will take an example of bank audit. When you are finalizing the bank audit, you may come across certain what you call these accounts which are NPA. Then you will say that I will prepare MOC for all those things, but there may be intimidation threat. Intimidation threat means like the bank manager requests you not to consider that as NPA because it may be small account or whatever the reasons. Then he may call to the regional office or central office. They may put pressure on you not to consider that as NPA. So all these threats, we should come across these threats and we should be independent. When once we are certifying, when once we are finalizing the audit, we should exercise our professional independence in those situations as such. Then these are all the schedules. As I said, two schedules, first schedule and second schedule. First schedule, there are 4 parts, and the second schedule we have 3 parts. First schedule is applicable for both the members in industry and members in practice. So part 1 in relation to members of ICA in practice, we have 12 clauses, and part 2 consists of the code of ethics in relation to members of ICA in service. We have 2 clauses. Then part 3 in relation to members of ICA generally, we have 3 clauses, and part 4 consists of other misconduct in relation to members of ICA generally. There we have 2 clauses. Then we have second schedule. Second schedule, first part consists of code of ethics in relation to members of ICA in practice. We have 10 clauses in that. Then part 2 is in general to members of ICA. In general means it may include for both members in practice and service, and the third one is other misconduct in relation to members of ICA, generally 1 clause. So this is the structure of first schedule and second schedule. Just to give some of the glimpse of first schedule and second schedule. Professional misconduct, first schedule, part 1, as I said, it is CS in practice. Some of the things which clauses which it contains is sharing of fees, partnership with non-CAs. So partnership with non-CAs is not allowed until unless that multi-disciplinary firm is there. Except that, I think we cannot have partnership with non-CAs, and we cannot share fees with non-chartered accountants. Solicitation, advertisement, offering to charge on percentage basis. Of course, there are certain exceptions to this, that is charging on fees on percentage basis. So these are some of the clauses which is coming under first schedule. And one more is not taking no objection certificate from the previous auditor. So this also we come across various cases between chartered accountants where the one chartered accountant will not take no objection certificate from the previous auditor. So these are all very small things that it can happen over a phone call, or even you can send one mail or one letter. So this will take maximum 5 to 10 minutes to write a mail or take a printout, sign and send it through post. So if you don't do all these things, you'll be in trouble. So you have to take no objection certificate from the previous auditor whenever there is attest functions or certification functions. And we also feel that if it is a big clients, you can even take, even if it is not a, what do you call this, audit functions. Sometimes general practice, we can have that general ethics of the profession or that firm. We can say that any new client comes where he has been attended by some other firm or individual, whatever it is, another chartered accountant, then you can make it as a habit or practice that we will write a letter and just take no objection. Then part 2, CAs in service, sharing of emoluments in employment. Of course, when in practice, we talk about sharing of fees. When the CAs are in service, we talk about sharing of emoluments in employment. You cannot share with anybody. Accepting part of fees or profits from other professionals by way of commission or gratification. So these are some of the clauses in part 2. Part 3, CAs in general, falsely represent himself as a fellow. So being a associate member, he should not represent himself as a fellow member, or not being a chartered accountant also, he should not represent as a chartered accountant, or its committees, or gives false information responding to tenders or inquiries. Then second schedule, part 1, CAs in practice, fails to perform the client's work diligently. So this is clause 7, where a chartered accountant will be considered as what do you call this, professional misconduct under this clause, where he is not working, client's work is not done with the due diligence with respect to financial statements, disclosures of information acquired in professional engagements, etc. Then part 2, CAs in general, contravention of provisions of ICA regulations or act, disclosure of confidential information as an employee, submitting false information to ICA or its committees. So these are some of the clauses covered under this professional misconduct, first schedule and second schedule. Then we have other misconduct in first schedule, part 4, general, other acts in general, acts bringing disrespect to the profession and or committed acts punishable up to 6 months. So this is covered under first schedule. And other acts in general with respect to second schedule, acts wherein courts have awarded imprisonment more than 6 months. So any acts less than 6 months comes under first schedule. Anything beyond 6 months, it will come under second schedule. We talk about moral turpitude, where a member has done something apart from our profession, he has done some other misconduct. Then those cases will be coming under other misconduct. So these are some of the basics I thought I will share with you with respect to the code of ethics. Then we have this disciplinary directorate. I'll just take you through how the disciplinary directorate will function, an overview of the current disciplinary mechanism. So coming to the introduction, it's the regulation of one of the regulations of ICA is to have this regulating the profession and core function of ICA. And there is an enabling provisions, chapter 5 of Chartered Accountants Act 1949, section 21 and 22, and rules framed thereunder. So under the current mechanism under section 21, the disciplinary directorate has been established by council, which is headed by Director Discipline, for making investigations in respect of any information or complaint which is received against any member of institute. So this I am talking about the erstwhile Act. There are certain amendments to this. Of course, more amendments is with respect to the composition of the what do you call this disciplinary committee. Otherwise, I am taking you to the old one which is existing as of now. So the director discipline shall form a prima facie opinion and thereupon shall place the same before board of directors or disciplinary committee as the case may be in terms of the provisions contained in section 21, 2 and 3. So there are, as I said, there are two schedules, schedule 1 and schedule 2. Any professional misconduct or other misconduct falling under any clauses of schedule 1, it will be dealt by board of discipline. If any of the professional misconduct or other misconduct is under second schedule, then it will go to disciplinary committee. So there may be situations where it falls both under some of the misconduct will be under schedule 1 and some of the misconduct will be in schedule 2. Then that also will go to disciplinary committee as such. With respect to what you call this not obtaining no objection certificate from the previous auditor. If you have not obtained no objection from the previous auditor, it comes under first schedule. But if there is some undisputed audit fees which has not been settled to the previous auditor and you have done the work, then it will go to the second schedule. So combined, it will come to second schedule and it will be dealt by disciplinary committee as such. The current mechanism is of a two-tier system wherein at first instance, director discipline is required to arrive at a prima facie opinion of alleged misconduct and thereafter the same is adjudicated upon by board of directors and DC as the case may be. As I said, if it is only covering schedule 1, it will go to board of discipline. If it is a part of it is the professional misconduct is part of schedule 2 or both the schedules, it will go to disciplinary committee. So whenever a complaint is raised, so say suppose anybody can raise complaint against anybody. So by filing a form 1 and paying the requisite fee, somebody can raise anonymous complaints also can be raised. So one thing we should understand, whenever a complaint is raised, it is not a case. So we should not say that this person is under disciplinary case or something like that. So a complaint is raised, it will not become a case until unless there is a process for that. So a complaint is raised, then it will go to director discipline and he will arrive at a prima facie opinion. And based on that prima facie opinion, if he may take that case as guilty or not guilty also. At the first stage itself, in the prima facie opinion stage itself, the cases can be decided whether it is guilty or not guilty. If at the prima facie opinion, if it is considered as not guilty, then the complaint will be, then it will stop at that position itself. It will not go further. Only when once the director discipline feels that this particular complaint has got some merit and it has to be discussed further and hearing has to be taken, then he will give that particular, means he will consider that as guilty and then they will forward it to board of discipline or disciplinary committee as the case may be. Then only the case will start. Till that point of time when either it goes to BOD or DC, it is not considered as case. So it's only a complaint as such. So this is a general thing I'm saying. So if somebody has raised a complaint against any of the member, we should not assume that he is under disciplinary mechanism already. The procedure to be adopted by Director Discipline Board of Directors and DC have been specified under the CA Rules 2007, which have been notified by central government in terms of section 21(4) and 21(b). So nature of cases. Generally, what are all the nature of cases we come across in case of this disciplinary mechanism? One is violation of accounting standards. As I said earlier, like we have to know all the accounting standards and auditing standards. So there may be cases where the member have violated the accounting standards or not properly followed the accounting standards while certifying a particular thing. So same way, violation of auditing standards, then violation of ICA guidelines. So ICA has given a lot of guidelines. So if the members violates any of these guidelines, then also it is subject to disciplinary. Like I can give an example, there is a guidance on what you call this tendering guidance is there. There is a guidance on advertising. There is a guidelines on how to prepare a website. There is a guidelines on the general guidelines are there, like with respect to the tax audits, what is the number of tax audits a member has to sign. With respect to companies, what is the number of companies a person has to sign. There is a guidelines on UDIN, how to generate UDIN, when to generate UDIN, all those things. So if there is any violation of these guidelines, then it will be subject to disciplinary mechanism. And most of the cases, it's not that it comes only from the client. Now, even we are getting cases from the departments also. It may be from SEBI, it may be from RBI. The bankers are sending, income tax department is sending. Then I can say like even this ROC, they are sending. SFIO is there where that is statutory fraud investigation officers. From that particular thing also they are getting. So there are a lot of complaints we get even from external agencies as such, apart from the clients or the chartered accountants. Then violations of provisions of Companies Act, of course, violation of RBI Act, dispute regarding audit of trust or societies. Whenever some of the cases we come across where a member is doing the audit of a trust or societies, so until unless a particular committee is good with him, so nothing will happen. If there is there is a fight between the previous committee or existing committee or between the same committees, then the first target will be chartered accountant. They will say the chartered accountant is not done properly and they will raise a complaint against the chartered accountant. Wrong ROC certification. I said I gave an example where the company had got 1 lakh authorized capital. A certificate was issued as 500 lakhs authorized capital. So these are the things where we can avoid. So we should be more careful while the professional skills and also due care. That's professional diligence and due care. What I said, one of the basic principles that we have to follow. Issuance of wrong certificate, disputes under Negotiable Instruments Act, then family disputes. So if there are some family disputes, that also there are some cases. Colluding in fraud with management or others. So I'm not saying that a lot of cases is colluding in fraud. Very, very minimum cases where chartered accountants will be in hand with the management and do fraud. Otherwise, most of the cases, what I have seen in past 8 or 9 months, I am also a member of the disciplinary committee. I'm not seeing many cases where the chartered accountants have done fraud. But as I said, mistake is also coming under the disciplinary mechanism. So by mistake, if you do mistake also and somebody points out that, then you will be in trouble. So we should be very careful. I have not come across many cases where the chartered accountants are involved in fraud as such. Then marital disputes between maybe the member and the spouse or something. Sometimes that also may happen. Partnership disputes also, like as I said about a trust or society, there may be 4 or 5 partners. There may be disputes between the partners. Their first target is chartered accountant. Non-communication with previous auditor, as already I said. Non-payment of audit fees of previous auditor. So non-communication with previous auditor is under first schedule. Non-payment of audit fee of previous auditor covers in the second schedule. So if that is the case, it will go to disciplinary committee. Then coming to the disciplinary mechanism, how it works, I think I'll take another 5 to 6 minutes. So there are 2 ways of getting into the disciplinary mechanism. One is by raising a complaint. Anybody can raise complaint against a member. So when once a complaint is raised, so it will be scrutiny and registration. So it will be registered when the complaint is raised. It will go to the Board of Discipline. The disciplinary directorate, he will register that particular and he will give a particular complaint number, and then it will be scrutinized. Then so and a complainant will be there and a respondent will be there. So when once the complaint is received, they will send to the respondent that this particular complaint has been received. So they will give 21 days time for the respondent to give a written statement. Then based on that, again, it will be sent to the complainant. So this is the complaint you have raised, and this is the written statement. This is the written statement. So then based on that, they will, whatever the written statement has been received, they will send it back to the complainant to get the rejoinder within 21 days. This is one way of getting the complaint. So the other one is information. As I said, there are various departments which will give an information, or there are certain committees in ICA also. Like NAFRA, we were telling, the chairman was mentioning about NAFRA, they may also give an information. Or we have this FRRB, TAQRB, quality review boards. Based on that also, based on information cases also, we can take it. But usually whenever information comes from the departments, so any other departments, like say suppose for example, it comes from income tax department or ROC or SEBI or bankers, we request to file form I. Even for complaint, you have to file form I. Even for information, we request them to file complaint in form I. When once they file this Form I, it will be converted as a complaint. So you have received that process as per the complaint route. So when once you receive Form I, it again all these things will happen. If you have not received Form I, so upon examination, if adequate papers or documents received, then it is treated as information. So just one line or one word or one page thing, it will not be possible for us to take it further. If I don't get Form I, then we have to examine uh, the documents or papers that are available with us. And if you feel that it is a fit case, then it will be treated as information. It will be taken forward. So when once it is treated as a fit case as an information, then again this process will start. Like we will send this letter to the respondent, asking him to give a written statement. Then again it will go to that what do you call this complainant, and we'll ask for the rejoinder. Not received insufficient document, then close the concurrence of with the concurrence of board of directors. So if you don't get any rejoinder from the complainant, only you will give an information and we collect some the written statement from the complainant, and subsequently you don't get any rejoinder, depending upon the case, and if you feel that nothing much is there in that, the case will be closed with the concurrence of board of directors. Then these are some of the what you can say stages. First one, as I already explained, that a written statement has to be obtained from the respondent. Then the same thing will be sent, and again you have to get a rejoinder from the complainant. The person who makes a complaint is called as a complainant, and on the member on whom the complaint is made is considered as respondent. Then the director discipline may ask for additional documents, both from complainant and the respondent. Then finally, he will form a prima facie opinion. Prima facie opinion will be formed by director discipline, and he can decide whether it is guilty or not guilty. So prima facie guilty. Say suppose the board of directors, the director discipline has considered a particular complaint as in the prima facie opinion as guilty. Then if it is under the first schedule, placed before board of discipline under section 21A, and if it is falling under second schedule or both schedule, that is both first and second schedule, then placed before disciplinary committee under section 21B. Then board of discipline or disciplinary committee will go through this PFO, that is prima facie opinion. If they agree, the matter is referred for further inquiry, that is for personal hearing. If they disagree with this prima facie opinion, the matter may either be closed or referred back to the director discipline for further investigation. So it's like when once you go in an appeal in income tax, so sometimes the CIT appeals will hear the case, or sometimes we feel that some more information is missing or something like that, you may refer it back to the previous adjudicating authority like income tax officer. So prima facie not guilty irrespective of the schedule. So if they agree, board of discipline under section 21A, the matter stands closed. So even if there is a prima facie opinion not guilty, that will go to the board of discipline. So the first stage is will go to the board of discipline. If they agree, the matter stands closed. If they disagree, so whatever this PFO is, they disagree, the matter is either referred back to the director discipline for further investigation, or may be taken up by the BOD or referred to DC, that is disciplinary committee, as the case may be, for further inquiry, that is for personal hearing as such. So if the board of discipline disagree with the prima facie opinion, which is not guilty, either they can refer it back to the director discipline, or they themselves can take that particular case for further complaint converted into case for further investigation if it is falling under first schedule, or they can forward it to the disciplinary committee where it is falling under either second schedule or both the schedules. Then hearing stages of board of directors or disciplinary committee, sharing of PFO with parties and calling of further written statements and further rejoinders. So even when once it comes to the board of discipline or director disciplinary committee, they can also give some more opportunity for both the complainant and respondent to give some more written statements, fixed date of hearing and issue notice to parties for hearing. So the hearing happens, and after hearing to the parties, arrive at a finding of guilty or non-guilty. So the either BOD or DC after giving sufficient time to the parties after hearing, then they will find out, it will come arrive at a finding as guilt or not guilt. If founding issue issue non guilty finding, case closed. Say in case of you have the DC or BOD has concluded the case of not guilty or not guilty, then the case is closed. If found guilty, issue guilty finding. So if the case is that the particular case we decide as guilty, the member is guilty, then issue guilty finding, the orders will be issued. Then punishment stage, guilty finding is shared with the parties to the case. So whenever you conclude the case and saying that that particular person member is guilty, then that will be shared with both complainant and respondent. And we will again fix a date of hearing to award punishment. So there will be a date which has been fixed for both the parties, and we will have a personal hearing before awarding the punishment. After hearing to respondent, quantum of punishment is decided. Issuance of punishment order. So when once punishment is decided, we have to issue the punishment order. So one thing we should understand here, when once a person is found guilty, it's only a punishment stage. So in punishment stage, we cannot reverse back. We cannot go back and say that you are not guilty. When you have been guilty, a person cannot be considered as not guilty. So only function in the punishment stage is just listen to them and give the punishment order. And when once the punishment order is received, he may file an appeal against order of board of directors or disciplinary committee before appellate authority under section 22G within 90 days if he so decides. So whenever a member receives a punishment order, and if he feels that he has to go against that particular order, he can go on an appeal. So withdrawal of a complaint, rule 6, before formation of PFO, that is prima facie opinion. Withdrawal received before formation of PFO would be placed before BOD only. If BOD is of the view that the circumstances so warrant, it may permit a withdrawal. So sometimes there may be a complaint that has been raised, and afterwards they may feel that there may be certain things where they feel that it may be a wrong complaint or not a valid complaint. There may be a situation where they will withdraw the complaint also. So before for formation of a PFO, that is prima facie opinion, the withdrawal will be placed before board of directors, and if they feel that it warrants, they may permit for withdrawal. Any withdrawal of complaint would be placed before board of directors or DC, as the case may be. If BOD or DC is of the view that the circumstances so warrant, may permit the withdrawal. So subsequently, after the formation of PFO, it comes, and if it is under it may be under BOD stage or DC stage, depending upon the misconduct as per Schedule 1 or Schedule 2. Then they will take a call. If really it warrants, they will allow for withdrawal. Otherwise, they will not allow for withdrawal. But in the changed what you call this amended CA regulations, there is no scope for withdrawal of a complaint. So once you submit, that is it. So you cannot get back that, or you cannot call back that particular complaint as such. So composition of board of directors and disciplinary committee. So board of discipline, not board of directors, board of discipline. We have presiding officer and a member, then a government nominee. When I say member, he will be a central council member, elected central council member. And government nominee means it's not a elected, government nominee of the central council. We will have other outside nominees from the government. See, we have in the council, as you know, 32 elected members and 8 government nominees. Usually those government nominees in that 8 may not be part of this disciplinary. You will have other government nominees. When it comes to disciplinary committee, we have presiding officer, member means there are 2 elected central council members and 2 government nominees. So quorum and the presiding officer of board of discipline and disciplinary committee. Any 2 members would form a valid quorum. So out of 3, any 2 can be a valid quorum. Presiding officer, 1 amongst the 2 appointed by council. So we say there are 2 council members in board of discipline. If the presiding officer is not coming, another person can be appointed, can be the presiding officer. In absence of presiding officer, other member appointed by council would act as presiding officer. Then disciplinary committee, minimum 3 members would form a valid quorum, out of which one should mandatorily be a government nominee. Presiding officer usually will be sitting president or vice president of ICA. In absence of presiding officer, senior most government nominee member present in the meeting would act as a presiding officer. See, with respect to this composition, we have 5 members where the presiding officer is, in the case of disciplinary committee, the president or vice president. Now, the new amendment says there should be only 2 members from the institute side and 3 members should be from government nominees. So out of this government nominees, one will be the presiding officer. So this is one amendment that has happened where they wanted 3 people in case of disciplinary committee from the government side and only 2 from the institute side. Same thing in board of discipline, 2 from government and 1 from the institute side. So board of powers of board of discipline and disciplinary committee. If a member is found guilty, and this I'm talking about board of discipline, which deals with first schedule professional misconducts or other misconducts. So he has got 3 options. One is he can reprimand the particular member. Reprimand means he will not be removed from the membership as such. Reprimand is giving a warning. So warning or a letter stating that these are all the things which you have, the mistakes that has been done and you have been held guilty. So you should not repeat such mistakes as such. So only a warning letter. Then removal of the name from the register up to 3 months. So when if a member has done something wrong and which is falling under first schedule, the maximum removal limit is 3 months. Then in case of financial penalties, imposition of fine extended up to rupees 1 lakh. So the maximum penalty that can be imposed is 1 lakh rupees under board of discipline. When it comes to disciplinary committee, the reprimand the members. So like similar to here, that reprimand, here also they can reprimand. Then removal of the name from the register for a specific period or permanently. So here maximum they have given is 3 months. Here there is no specification. It can be like 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, or permanently also, depending upon the situation or depending upon the case to case basis. And imposition of fine extendable up to rupees 5 lakhs. So here the maximum amount is 1 lakh, and here what they have given for disciplinary committee is 5 lakh. In fact, last year something I think we had one news item where one of the member had signed 431 tax audit reports, and he was put a penalty of 1,000 rupees per audit, which came to 4,31,000. Most of us were furious why we would have charged more penalties as such. But when once I saw this, the maximum availability for us is 5 lakh. In the new act, it has been increased to 10 lakhs. But still, sometimes we may have to put more penalty to the member, but the government is not allowing us or giving us powers to put more penalties on erring members as such. So the disciplinary portal is there. So you can do online this thing. The disciplinary portal is there. Then you can file the complaint, and also reports or orders of board of discipline, and reports or orders of disciplinary committee. You can get it in the portal. So these are some of the things, the basic things I thought I will explain to you with respect to code of ethics and disciplinary mechanism. I think I have taken only 1 hour exactly. One more thing I would like to say is like some of the things, as I said, it's not codified law, but as I said, ethical practices. And when you have to follow the law of the land. Like one is corruption, where we know that it's not an accepted principle. So it's wrong to be involved in corruption as such. My sincere advice is, of course, as chartered accountants, we cannot stop corruption overnight. It's something like it is coming over the years, and until mankind is there, it will be there. But as chartered accountants, we should try to see that we will not be part of that, or we should be away from that. My sincere advice is, whenever we represent the department, we can only go and represent technically. So we should only represent technically, and we should not indulge in any financial dealings as such. If something is there that is between the client and the department as such, we should only go and represent technically about the client. So that we will not be involved in this activities as such. That is one thing. And second thing, like even collecting fees. Like you may collect fees in cash. If you don't raise a proper invoice, we may not be paying GST and income tax on that. That also is not a correct practice as such. So these are all the professional ethics which we may have to practice in day-to-day profession as such. As I said, it's not a very complicated code of ethics as such, as I said in earlier slides. So if you follow if you follow the things and if you are honest and truthfulness to your work and also get updated with the latest developments, whether it is with the taxation laws or the accounting standards or auditing standards, you need not worry too much about this. Once again, I thank the ESP board and also the Bangalore branch for giving this opportunity. I hope a lot of people would have participated in this and would have got some value addition with respect to code of ethics. Thank you once again.
Thank you, Kotha sir. Sir, 2 questions is there you will answer now or end of the session, sir?
Maybe if I think we can do the other session also. Maybe some of the questions may be answered there also. Otherwise, I'll answer afterwards.
Okay, sir. We'll take it into
Of that, some practical aspects he will be taking, so that we'll give some time for him. You can share that questions and be prepared afterwards. If it is not answered, I'll answer.
It is in Q&A, sir. You can see.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for an excellent session, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Over to Mangesh Kinare, sir.
Just allow me to share the content, please.
Yeah. I will close it.
Sir, you can share now.
Now you can share it.
You're able to see?
Yes.
Yeah. Good evening, everyone. My council colleague and vice chairman with me in Evaluation Standard Board, CA Cotha Srinivas, chairman of Bangalore branch, Mr. Srinivas again, other office bearers, ESB secretariat, and my professional colleagues. First of all, let me thank Bangalore branch for coordinating with the Ethical Standard Board for organizing this program. And I must thank Kotha ji for taking an initiative in this and had an excellent session to begin with. Sorry, in the beginning, they had some issues, internet issues. I hope they would not recur again. I have changed the internet connection, different connection. But if still it is there, I would request chairman to immediately point me out on my phone so that I can again have some kind of a changes. As I have said, that it's been a good session in the to begin with and have a complete overview. And I really compliment Mr. Kotha for this, as he has been doing a great work in the council, especially for a small and medium practitioner. I know how much he cares and how many issues he takes up. Similarly, for this session also, he has taken a very good overview with respect to small and medium practitioners. And taking clue from him, I have taken this session as he said, some practical issues, some commonly observed issues for small and medium practitioners, and certain new provisions, or rather certain provisions which were deferred earlier and made applicable from 1st October 2022. We are going to cover. I have some 1.5 hours. Within that, I will try to cover, and some 10 minutes later, we can have some quick Q&A session. To begin with, I'm taking certain issues which we face in the practical life, and then we'll go to the new provisions. Friends, typically when we are in practice, so this session will be completely on the issues in code of ethics for chartered accountants in practice. Friends, typically, before I start again, let me compliment the branch and of course ESB for that matter. I'm told that the attendance for this program is more than 1,000. So great thing which has happened. Yeah. So the first issue I would like to tackle here is what can be the services rendered in chartered accountant in practice. Yesterday only I had a call, rather today morning, whether I can be a director in a company because I have a family concern, so on and so forth. A lot of issues arise whether insolvency professional can have to take a certificate of practice, what is a part-time in practice, so on and so forth. So I'm tackling this issue to begin with. See, if you see our section 2, subsection 2 of Chartered Accountants Act, it defines the activities which can be undertaken by the chartered accountant in practice. In fact, it is a section, a deeming section. It says that a member shall be deemed to be in practice if he is doing following activities. Now, in those activities, I would request my all friends to see the presentation when I'm running through this, because I may not refer to each and every clauses of presentation. But when I'm talking, perhaps you will have, if you have it in front of you, you will have a complete reference of what I'm talking. Because otherwise, if I start reading, it will be simply a reading a presentation and it would not give practical insight into you. So section 2, subsection 2, if we read carefully, which is there in front of your screen, it is only talking about accounting and auditing per se. So perhaps the question arises, in fact, there's an issue raised by chartered accountant. He said that, in tax practice, when he was using a tax practice, and somebody asked him whether you are allowed to do a tax practice or not. Show us a clause where you're allowed to do a tax practice. And he could not locate it. Now, that's why I thought that I'll take up this issue, because our section 2, subsection 2 only talks about, at least first 3 clauses, talks about the accounting and auditing. The 4th clause, which is at the end, you can see a residuary clause, that such other services which are prescribed by the council. Now, council has prescribed around 28 services or 29 services, which is again on your screen. And if you go through it again, there also we don't have any reference to the taxation services. 2 new things have come up last year in this, that is a registered valuer and insolvency professional in that. Now, these things will solve your problem, whether the insolvency professional or registered valuer should take a COP or not. In fact, if you are a member and you are doing an insolvency professional or doing a registered valuer, then you are deemed to be in practice and you are supposed to take the certificate of practice. Now, as I'm saying regarding taxation service, it's not been mentioned in any of the clauses, which apparently not mentioned in any of the clauses of section 2, subsection 2. But friends, in this the prescribed services by council, there is one service at the end, and that is called as administrative service. Now, if you look at a definition of administrative service, which is there in a volume 1, which Cotha ji referred to regarding the fundamental principles and all, in that volume 1, subsection 602, administrative services have been defined. And in that, again, which is there in the second pointer, if you can see on the screen, in that it talks about, it has given an example of word processing services, preparing administrative statutory forms for client approval, submitting such forms as instructed by clients, monitoring statutory filing dates, advising the client for those dates. So here comes the first coverage of our taxation services. So in this, preparing the return form, submission of the returns form, and consultation regarding filing dates, etc., would be definitely covered. The only 2 important things which I would like our friends to remember, that when we have defined that administrative services can be done by a chartered accountant in practice, and returns will come under that. If you see here, the underlined portion on the screen, that preparing administrative or statutory forms for client approval and submitting such forms as instructed by client. So these services we have to tackle, and we have to take approval and instructions from the client, either on email or in writing from them when we do these things. And as Cotha ji has rightly said, that many of the taxation services, unnecessarily we take a huge responsibility on ourselves, right? And then, because filing is also done from our system, and then whatever mistake, perhaps the information may not be given by the client correctly, and we own up that mistake because we don't take such client approval and client instructions. So our code requires that client approval and client instructions should be taken for submission of such forms. I know that for small and medium practitioner, it is always client says on phone, just submit it here, you know everything, you only done it, you prepare it. But please, on paper, please do that documentation at your end, because we have seen many cases where the problem arises, the client disowns and he says that chartered accountant has only done it, I don't know anything. So it's better to have a client approval and instructions of the client on our hand. Further, regulation 191 also gives us power that chartered accountant can do the financial or tax, advisory or representation in the costing, financial or taxation matters. So all the taxation matters are covered under regulation 191, and this residuary clause of section 2 subsection 2 clause 4 residuary clause administrative services. So whoever faces this difficulty, where am I allowed to do a taxation services, right? These are the clauses. I thought that I should highlight it. Now, having known that what activities can be done, now whether we can indulge into any other activities. Now, in this regard, Kothaji referred to some Schedule 1 and Schedule 2. I would like to draw your attention to Clause 11 of Part 1 of First Schedule of CA Act. Now, it says that a chartered accountant in practice cannot undertake any activities. Now, what is allowed? There's an exception in that clause. In that exception, it has been mentioned that he can be a director in a company, not being a managing director or whole-time director. That is director simpliciter, provided he or his partner is not interested in that company as an auditor. So a practicing chartered accountant cannot do any other activity, cannot be involved in any company, etc. But there's an exception to it. He can be a director simpliciter in a company. Now, director simpliciter has been defined into 2020. I mean, it is not that the definition was not there earlier. This addition to code is a clarificatory in nature. So it was there earlier also and it's previous, but it is for the benefit of the members. It has been clarified specifically in Code of Ethics now to mean that it is an ordinary or simple director and not being whole-time or managing director. His presence is required only in the board meetings and he draws only remuneration for attending those board meetings. So he should not be involved in any of the activities of the company. He should be simply attending the board meetings, participating in a board meeting or board committee meeting, of course, and drawing a remuneration only for attending the board meetings. Now, the question today morning, one member asked me regarding this, that whether I can be a director. So I said, you can be a director simpliciter and draw only the sitting fees. So he said that I want to draw professional fees. I'm not signing any documents, but I want to draw professional fees. So friends, professional fees, when you draw from a company in which you are a director, it means you are involved in the activities of the company. You cannot be a director of a company and draw professional fees. So remember that we can be a director in a company and it should be a director simpliciter if you have to be in a full-time practice. Now, director simpliciter, when it is defined, now especially in private limited company, in my personal view, one can be a director simpliciter provided there are two more directors. Because private limited company requires two directors. Now, if only one director is a director simpliciter and one is a whole-time director, then there's again an issue of signing the normal routine documents. Directors are to sign the documents of the company, but which are statutorily required to be signed by him. So if it is not statutorily required to be signed by all the directors, if it is statutorily required, any of the two, private limited company would face a problem. And that's why, in my personal view, in a private limited company, if you want to become a director simpliciter, there has to be at least two additional directors who are actually whole-time directors or looking after the affairs of the company. Now, there are certain other things also which have been allowed. Clause 11 prohibits practicing chartered accountant from doing these activities, certain activities other than practice. In that clause, there is an exception of director simpliciter. But in addition to that, there are Regulation 190A and Appendix 9 to CA regulation, which allows activities to be carried out by the chartered accountants. It is defined under two parts. One is general permission, second is specific permission. Under general permission, if you are carrying out these activities, no need of applying to the institute for this. But in a special permission, these two or three or four, whatever activities have been listed there, you can see on your screen. If you are doing these activities, you have to apply or you have to request for the permission of the council in this regard. In general permission, you can do employment with CA firm, private tutorship. You can be an office bearer, honorary office bearer of educational institution, NGOs. You can be notary, SEMs, paper checkers, and all those things. And recovery consultants in a bank. So practicing chartered accountants can do, it's a general permission that recovery consultant, I'm not saying agent, recovery consultants, loss surveyors. In fact, I know in Mumbai at least there are 3 chartered accountants who are is clearly allowed to us. The last one in this is owning an agricultural land and carrying an agricultural activity. Friends, I would suggest you, I'm not so senior to advise you, but I would suggest you that whenever you are interpreting code of ethics, please, interpret it in letter and spirit, not only, what is mentioned there. So, I mean, you have to, or at least we have to interpret it in the most conservative manner. Owning agricultural land and carrying agricultural activity was not there earlier in general permission, which was brought some years back, I think if not around 10, 12 years back. And the intention behind that was many of the chartered accountants are from agricultural families, and they are having lands which is ancestral land in their name, and some activities are being carried out. This clause does not allow you to do this activity on as a business. So what is done in income tax is not material here. So you should not be doing it as a business activity per se. It should not be your major activity. It should not be your primary activity. Now that is again depending upon the facts. There are no criteria for that. You have to ask yourself that whether I'm primarily doing it or not. Right? As I said, it is to be in a letter and spirit has to be implemented. So it is allowed from that perspective and also from that perspective. Lecture in university colleges, you can do it, provided your teaching hours within the week are not more than 25 hours. Of course, specific permission is required. So these are the activities which can be undertaken. Highlight on, right? Non-designated or non-working or non-remunerating, drawing partners in LLP, which is doing a business activity. We have seen in a company, you can be a director simpliciter, right? Whether similar kind of a position, a non-designated or non-remuneration drawing partner, whether a practicing chartered accountant can take in an LLP, which is doing a business activity. Now, it has been very clearly clarified last year, into 2020, that there is no equivalence between company and LLP. So one cannot any kind of a partner in LLP, which is doing a business activity. Of course, LLP, which is a chartered accountant firm, you can be a partner, no problem at all. There is no question at all. As regards majority shareholding in a private limited company, there was a question to me. That's why I've taken this issue. Whether I cannot be a director in a private limited company, or I can be a director, simplicity, but whether I can have a majority shareholding, yes, definitely majority shareholding is allowed. There's no harm in it. As regards shares derivative transaction, at present, the derivative transactions on your own account are allowed. As regards the share trading is not allowed. Share investment is allowed for a chartered accountant in practice. Share trading is treated as an other engagement of business. Whatever I am speaking is at provisions as on date. We are, let me tell you, as an ethical standard board chairman, we are in the process of revamping this volume 2 of Code of Ethics. Your suggestions with justifications are welcome to you. Please write to esb@ici.in. I'll repeat it at the end also. Now, whether the activities can be carried out by us in a HUF. And now there was a lot of furor. There's one FAQ, and last year in 2020, I recollect that there was a lot of furor in the WhatsApp. It was moving on that institute is not allowing us to form an HUF, create an HUF. Now, what does that mean? It means that there should not be any activities carried on, business activities carried out in the name of HUF by chartered accountants. So this is the other way of doing a business activity. If not in your name, okay, we'll do it in the name of HUF. That is not allowed. We can have our HUF which is in existence, which is having a existence right from beginning. Automatically HUF comes into existence automatically. There need not be a creation for that. So if at all any ancestral property, income, FD, which is there in our name, which is coming out, then HUF is formed. So that manner of HUF, we can have it. There's no harm in it, but you should not create an HUF and out a business in that. If at all any ancestral business is being run in the name of HUF, of which a chartered accountant in practice, by virtue of succession, becomes has to be taken for. I mean, permission can be given subject to the condition that you are not taking active part in that activity, right? And of course, you may be treated as a part-time in practice. Now, the next issue is whether I can have a general power of attorney on behalf of my client. Many times, chartered accountants take it, and I have seen a disciplinary case also in this regard. Now, general power of attorney means you are doing the activity, business activity of that client. we can take a specific power of attorney for the specific activities to be carried out. It should not be a business activity. It can be in relation to our profession, like representing in a tax cases, going for the bankers, for negotiating the bank loans, and so on and so forth. By general power of attorney, please don't take it. Now, these are the few issues which I thought that I will take up. Going further, friends, the next issue I would like to handle, I think Kothaji also touched upon a little bit in this, that I will take up, because many cases are found in this case, in these issues. That is appointment of an auditor. Now, there is one clause referred to it, clause 9, part 1, first schedule, which says that when we are appointed as an auditor, it is regarding the companies specifically. When we are appointed as an auditor of Companies Act, we must see that the compliance with section 139, 140 of the Companies Act, or the specific relevant provisions of Companies Act have been done or not. Now, it typically happens that, especially in case of private limited companies, that client comes to us saying that no, I'm not happy with the earlier auditor, so we want to appoint you. And other earlier auditor does not have any objection. Now, how they will appoint us? Let us try and look into the matters with a proper legal angle. If there is, the Companies Act very clearly provides that there cannot be a removal of auditors unless and until, right, a special notice is given and a central government permission is taken in this regard. For non-appointment of retiring auditors, special notice under section 144 has to be given and resolution has to be passed. Now, all these things, it seems to be very simple, when in a September month, the client comes saying that I'm not happy with, and we are also, happy that new client is coming. Why should I leave? Some lack of rupees fees is there. He's not happy with the earlier one. So why should not I do it? But friends, request to you that please see that all these statutory filings, all these appointments are done properly or not. Otherwise, there can be issue. I can cite a case which is there from southern part of the country only. I don't want to name the place, where the appointment was done, as there was bank finance going on regarding one company, and the chartered accountant was only doing a bank finance. Some regularization of filing was to be done as far as annual returns are concerned, company balance sheets are concerned. So he requested his, he had done article with somebody. So he requested his principal, sir, there is nothing in the balance sheet. First 4 years, there was nothing. So please sign it prospectively, not retrospectively. And that, senior chartered accountant, because his article was doing this things, he was not doing us attest functions. Because he requested him, he signed in a good faith on this prospectively, on the current date, not retrospective. There was nothing in the balance sheet, some share capital, some small provision, and some bank balance, and so on and so forth. There was nothing in the balance sheet practically. So he signed it. He thought that there's nothing, no problem at all. I'm doing this favor to my, junior. Unfortunately, after a few years, there was a dispute between amongst the directors, and one of the group of the directors, which was not having a contact with the this chartered accountant, or which were against that person who was doing a bank proposal, they filed a case against chartered accountants saying that, see, these people have fooled us. They have got it accounts audited from a chartered accountant without being approved, without there being a proper appointment. Now, there was no appointment because 4 years signing was done. There was no AGM, no notice was given. And this very senior chartered accountant, mind you, faced a huge problem before disciplinary committee, because there was nothing in his hand to show that his appointment was made. Not even the appointment letter per se is not complete proof. So the filing has to be done properly with the ROC. It has to be backed up with the proper resolutions. So please ensure that in case of companies. Similar care has to be taken regarding the especially the cooperative societies, trusts, etc. Proper appointment letter with a proper authority, one has to ensure, otherwise this will have an issue for chartered accountants in practice. So please look into the appointments. And going further with an appointment, there's a huge issue which Kothaji also mentioned regarding the communication with the previous auditor. Now, they have in many cases in this regard, there are many cases which are coming up also, because again, we are perhaps, I'm not blaming any chartered accountant, but we are perhaps more inclined towards our client than our professional brothers and sisters. So we think more of a client. So a client comes saying that, no, this chartered accountant is not proper. I want to change him. And we sympathetically as well as commercially get attracted. No, no problem. I'll do that. Especially this happens in tax audit. Who is going to check it? Let's see later. And the audits are done at the last moment without communicating with the previous auditor. Now, friends, clause 8, part 1 of the first schedule says that the chartered accountant in practice who is appointed as an auditor shall communicate in writing with the CA who was previously holding that position before accepting such appointment. Now, 2, 3 the important things which I have highlighted, it is appointed as auditor. So the clause does not talk about only the statutory audit. It is any kind where the auditor word is used or statutory the auditor word is required. Any kind of an audit, this clause is applicable. So internal audit also, this clause is applicable. Forensic auditor also per se, this clause is applicable. So please bear that in mind that it is not only for statutory audit on the Companies Act or tax audit or trust audit and so on and so forth. For any kind of an audit where the auditor word is used, audit word is used, this clause is applicable. Now, whether I should I'm required to do communicate with previous year's auditor. For example, say in the first year there was a tax audit, the second year there was no tax audit, third year again there is not a tax audit, fourth year again the entity comes under tax audit. Now, whether the fourth year's auditor should communicate with the first year auditor, or he can say that previous year there was no audit, so I need not communicate at all. The law is very clear. It says that he should communicate with the chartered accountant who was previously holding that position. So in a given case, the fourth year auditor has to communicate with the first year auditor if it is different, right? So it's very clear in our clause also. One cannot say that, no, last year there was no audit, so no need of communication at all. So not allowed this time. A very important thing which I have highlighted on the screen, that communication to be made before acceptance of audit. Now, many times it has been seen that, especially when the audits are conducted at the end towards the tax audit period, the appointments are given on mail. On 28th of September, the appointment is given. And there is no time at all, or the mail perhaps goes later on, or mail is written, on say 28th or 29th of September, that whether there is any objection in this regard. The person who is a outgoing auditor also gives you, there's no issue at all. But then when you sign it, perhaps you sign it on 28th of September. Now the communication has gone to the previous auditor on 29th of September, whereas you are signing on 28th of September. Forget that. Even if you sign it on 29th of September, whether a tax audit can be completed in 1 day's time after the communication is received. So suppose you have received 29, you have given a communication on 29, immediately the outgoing auditors gives you no problem, go ahead. And you are signing it on 29th and 30th of September, whether it is possible to sign, because such cases have come before the disciplinary bench that no professional due diligence has been done. The tax audit has been completed in 1 day, or tax audit has been completed before acceptance of an audit, before giving a communication. Now, therefore, this last moment, work which comes to us, we have to be very careful. We are online session, so practical tips I can't give here. But definitely we have to take utmost care when this last moment acceptances are given. Whatever way you have to establish that you have given the acceptance, you have communicated before giving an acceptance, and after accepting an audit, you had a reasonable time to complete that audit also. How to do it? I think I need not explain. Then the modes of communication. Many times people feel that I can send it by way of courier and all those things. So it is not allowed. At present, only 3 modes of communication allowed. Hand delivery, of course, with an acknowledgement, registered post with acknowledgement received, and communication with email on a registered email address where it is acknowledged by the recipient. The fourth one is not yet come into practice. It is urine-based communication. We are working on that. But email, just sending an email, just sending a letter is not sufficient. It has to be acknowledged. So please remember that it has to be acknowledged by the person. Now there are certain relaxation. I am not going in this. This presentation will be there with you. You can see that, and it is there in the volume 2 of our Code of Ethics also. Now, there's an interesting clause under Council General Guidelines. Now, Council General Guidelines says that it is not under this clause, but it is related to this thing, this similar kind of an issue, change in auditor. If a member of an institute in practice shall not accept an appointment as an auditor if undisputed fee of another chartered accountant carrying out statutory audit under Companies Act or various other acts has not been paid. Now, I have highlighted, if you can see the screen, shall not. So shall not is very important. There is no question, there is no option at all. So if I'm appointed as a statutory auditor under Companies Act or any other act, so tax audit is also a statutory audit, right? Cooperative auditor is also a statutory audit, because statutory audit, we have a feeling that means a company audit only. So any other statutory audit, if we are doing, or any statutory audit we are doing, if I'm appointed as a statutory auditor, and if I find that my earlier auditor's fees has not been paid, there is no question of accepting it and saying it. It shall not accept. Now, even if the NOC is given, right, the guideline is very clear: shall not accept if it is not been paid. It is not giving any of the exception here. If you take a NOC from him, now that is a practical part of it. And you have to be very careful that even if the NOC is taken, this fees has been paid to the earlier auditor. If it is not paid, later on, it may pose a problem, even if see the earlier auditor fees has been paid or not. If it is paid, and if the communication is sent to him, you can start the audit. In case of other audits, this clause is not applicable. So payment of fees, earlier fees, is not issue. Now, there you can communicate, wait for a reasonable time, and you can start your audit. You can accept the audit if there is no communication from the earlier auditor. But please remember that the acknowledgement should be there by the earlier auditor regarding your communication. Now, there are two exceptions regarding undisputed fees. Now, what is an undisputed fees? Which is provided in the books of accounts and signed by auditor and auditee both. Recently, the Ethical Standard Board has taken decisions regarding the cash system of accounting. One has to go through the documentation and see the appointment and the fees which is being fixed, because in cash system of accounting, fees may not be provided in the books of account. So if the undisputed statutory audit fees is not paid, then one shall not accept an audit. There is a temptation for an audit, no problem. Please remember, just raising an artificial dispute or a dispute over an email would not justify that it is a disputed fees. So there has to be a genuine dispute in this regard. Again, I repeat, we have to interpret the code of ethics in letter and spirit. So this is regarding the communication. There are certain other issues which arise in communications and change of auditor. Now, whether this is applicable to one-time audit assignments. Now, one-time audit assignments means the department appoints an auditor for special audit purpose. Now, our commentary in Code of Ethics specifically says that if a tax audit has been done by somebody else and I am appointed as a one-time auditor by a department to conduct a special audit, it is my duty, a professional duty. See, this clause is basically from two perspectives. One is, of course, a professional courtesy, which we think, right, and which is correct also. But in addition to that, the code very clearly says that communication has to be done so that we will be able to understand if there are any specific things which have to be looked into as far as that audit is concerned. So from both the perspective, so whenever you are doing a special audit also, it is necessary that you should communicate with the regular auditor. Now, I have mentioned this as far as fees of internal audit is pending, we can do that, no problem. If the communication is sent and it is found that the premises is locked or address is not found, if it is sent on the register address which is registered with the institute, and if such things are happened, the communication shall be deemed to have been delivered to the recipient. Now, what would happen if the previous auditor is not responding? I've already mentioned that as far as statutory audit is concerned, if it is not, fees is not paid, there's no question of response from the previous auditor. But in case of other things, or if in case of statutory audit, if the previous auditor's fees has been paid and he's not responding, your duty is to communicate get an acknowledgement of that communication, wait for the reasonable time. After acknowledgement, if say the reasonable time, say 8 days, 10 days, 15 days time, no response is received, you can very well start with an assignment, assuming that, or it is presumed that there is no problem at all for him. Because we are not taking NOC per se, right? We are just communicating. The code says that one has to communicate. Correct. Now, what would happen that as regards cash system or disputes regarding fees, I have already discussed. The communication of assignment done by other professional. This happened especially in case of a GST audits, right? Other professional. Now, there, of course, there is no legal binding on us, but as Kothaji discussed in his first address, that code does not only talk about law; it talks about morality also. So, morally, in a commentary, it is mentioned that it is better. It is not binding, but it is better if we communicate with the other professionals also. Because again, the second objective of this communication is to understand about the client from the earlier auditor. And in that respect, it is better to communicate. So if previous, now the question many times says that if previous auditors resigned or surrendered COP, do I really have to communicate with them? Because he has voluntarily resigned. Why should I communicate with him? Now, again, I have explained the two purposes of this communication. In both these scenarios, it is necessary. The communication has to be done with the auditor, chartered accountant who was previously conducting the audit. Going further, charging of fees. The next issue is regarding charging of fees. Whether I'm allowed to charge the fees on a percentage basis or contingencies. If such thing happens, then I'll charge this much. If it's not happened, I'll charge this much. So that kind of fees, percentage or contingent fees, we are not allowed to charge. There are, of course, certain exceptions. Now, the clause clearly says, this is a legal clause, as per law, right? Fees based on percentage of profits or contingent upon findings or results of such employment. Now, see, percentage of profit, right? Or fees which are contingent upon findings or results of such employment. Now, it may not be on the percentage of profit, but if it is on the turnover, if it is on the basis percentage of turnover, whether it is on the contingent upon results, now one has to see that, and one has to be factually, therefore, when we fix up such fees, we must be very careful in this regard. There are exceptions given to us by Regulation 192, and which is mentioned on your screen. I am not repeating, but typically certain work requires that the fee has to be charged on the basis of percentage or contingencies, like bank finance or evaluation or cost optimization services, so on and so forth. Even in insolvency or non-assurance services to non-audit client, now the council has specifically allowed to charge the fees. The very important thing which has been pointed out at the end of this slide is that if my terms of engagement say that I will charge the fees if following conditions are satisfied, my fees will be so much. If the following conditions are not satisfied, my fees will be so much. Now, my fees, let's say rupees 1 lakh rupees. Now, if such and such thing happens, my fees will be 2 lakhs rupees. Ultimately, that thing does not happen and I am charging only 1 lakh rupees. Now, whether still I am infringing this clause? Yes, because if you read this clause, it is not only the charging, but offer to charge such fees is also against our ethical conduct. So we should not even offer to charge such fees, of course, subject to these exceptions. Going further, friends, for the next issue. Yeah, next issue is regarding the confidentiality and custody of clients' assets or money. Now, as has been discussed earlier session also, the fundamental principle, Kothaji explained that confidentiality is a fundamental principle. So it has been supported by our clause also in the second schedule, second schedule part 1, first clause, which says that a chartered accountant in practice shall not disclose any information acquired in his professional engagement to any person other than his client, right? Without the consent of the client, or otherwise than as required by law in force. So if the legal requirement is there to share the information, we have to share. Say, for example, Reserve Bank of India requires us to share certain information. We have to share. with respect to our audit or with respect to our other engagements, if it is required by RBI Act. But if it is not required by that, then unless the clients permits us, we should not disclose that information. I can give you a classic case here, which had happened before a disciplinary bench. One person was doing a bank finance. He was a chartered accountant in practice, was doing a bank finance for its client. Now, the bankers asked certain information from him regarding the location of stock and type of stock located in each place. Instead of asking that, he did not have any specific power of attorney in his hand. So instead of going back to the client and getting a permission and signed a document from him, he himself gave the permission to the bankers. Now, bankers, for the purpose of giving the finance, conducted a visit to these premises. Now, client was very angry because client did not want to disclose one of his godowns to anybody. For whatever reason, see, the disciplinary matters or our conduct is applicable to us and not the clients. So client reason may be something illegal things. But when we are disclosing that information, we should have asked the client. So this person, in order to get the loan proposal approved fast, he gave the information which was available with him and which went against him because he had not taken permission from the client. Bankers, which they require the information, it is not as per any law. It is for the processing the loan. Right? Law does not say that he has to give A, B, C, D, X, Y, Z information. So one has to be very careful when sharing the information of client with outsiders. We have to take client, if it is not required by any law, we have to take permission of the client. There was a call from one of the branch of the ICI to me a few months back that he has received a call from police station asking that to share the financial statements of his client because some inquiry was going on against his client. Now that person said that whether I can submit it. Now, if we go through this clause, we cannot submit because simple phone call from a police is not as required by law for the time being in force. And if definitely he asked the permission of the client would not have given it. And therefore, in such scenario, perhaps I gave a solution and that worked at least that time, that he can cite this provision to the police station and please tell them that he can write me two lines saying that so and so criminal procedure code clause requires you to give us information, and you give it. So friends, you have to be very careful in this regard. One very interesting case in this regard, again, I would mention here, I cannot resist it from that. There was a income tax files. A chartered accountant was having income tax files of the entire family. They were doing a business. Father-in-law, the person, then his son and his daughter-in-law, and other family members also. Regularly, the daughter-in-law was interacting with the chartered accountant. Son and daughter-in-law were interacting with the chartered accountant with respect to the businesses. One day, the daughter-in-law came in the office and asked for the income tax returns copies of all the family members. Now, he felt that it's a normal client, so he gave all the copies. Later on, it was observed that there was a separation case which was going on, divorce case which was going on in the court of law, and this daughter-in-law required this income tax paper to fix the alimony amount in the court, which she took from a chartered accountant and produced in the court of law. Now, her estranged husband and father-in-law filed a case against chartered accountants saying that why you have shared our income tax paper with us. Many times we feel that family is our client, but friends, such examples actually should open our eyes and let us take a proper permission from the clients when we share these informations with the outsiders. So many issues are there in case of fraud, suppression, etc. by the client, whether we should go on board or not and disclose this information. Unless law requires, we are not allowed to do it. Now, if there's a case against chartered accountant, whether the information can be shared in a court of law. Now, that information which is otherwise can be available to court, definitely we can disclose to court, but certain business secrets, just in order to harass the client, one cannot disclose in a court of law. Now, there's other clause in this regard of confidentiality and custody of clients' assets. It says that clause 10, it may not be directly related to that, but it is very interesting. And there are a couple of cases, rather one case, very eye-opener case, which is there, which I would like to discuss. It says that if we fail to keep the client's money in a separate account or using it for the purpose for which it is required in a reasonable time, right, then it is not a proper conduct. I'll give you one very interesting case which happened. In fact, we only have decided in 2017 this matter. Now, there was one case, a case in which the chartered accountant was doing all the tax payments for the clients. What happened was advance tax liability was coming huge. And therefore, chartered accountant informed him that this is an advance tax liability. On 1st September, the money came in chartered accountant's account, which is a separate account for tax payments, right? And it was a huge amount for advance tax payment. For some transaction had occurred, share transaction had occurred, so amount was very huge. So on 1st September, the client deposited the money in chartered accountant's account. Now, the advance tax was also paid on 14th September or something of that kind, right? No problem, no legal issues at all. Later on, there was some dispute between client and the chartered accountant. And client took out certain issues against the chartered accountant, and he found this issue and he filed a case. One of the issue in that case was that you have used my money, you have kept my money for 13 days and you have used my money for 13 days. Now, chartered accountant was surprised. He pleaded that I have paid within the time. There was no default from my side. Now, friends, our clause says that money has to be kept in a separate account. That I was completely satisfied. And it has to be used for the purpose which it is given within the reasonable time. I'm talking about the money other than fees. So the tax payment was received on 1st September. If the 2nd September or 3rd September it would have been paid, whether it would not have been advance tax, it would have been advance tax. But we are so used to it that 15th September is the due date, means 13, 14, 15, we have to make the advance tax payment. No problem. I mean, no issues in that also. But then we must inform to the client. See, you can deposit the money at any date, but from our office, I can't go on paying the advance tax on every day for my each and every separate client. So from our office, advance tax payment will be done only after 12th of September. So that kind of a communication, that kind of an SOPs we have to develop. In this case, unfortunately, friends, there was no defense in the hands of the chartered accountant. We in fact also checked the bank account of that chartered accountant, the separate bank account. Unfortunately for chartered accountant, the balance was always there. But unfortunately for him, there was a receipts and payment entries from 1st September to 14th September, although the balance was there. So, of course, it was represented by from the complainant side by a very reputed advocate also. So he had completely dissected this. And unfortunately for us, we depend always on the, in good faith as far as client is concerned. And client perhaps after the issue arises, doesn't keep good faith on us. Please remember that. So from that point of view, I think we must be very careful in doing all these kind of payments for our clients. Now, friends, in this regard, one has to be, I always take this under the client's assets or custody of client's asset, because to my mind, be very careful in using it, because otherwise it is very onus on us to prove that this, if it is proved that it was lying with us, then it is very difficult for us at times if the client raises a hand, that issue is there. And many times we loosely communicate with the client on emails. They send you a digital signature, I will affix it and do it, and all these kind of things. So please be careful in custody of this client's assets, including digital signature. Books of accounts are also client's asset. There's an ethical standard board decision I have cited that we cannot have a lien on any of these things, right? So for the money is not paid, fees is not paid, so I will not give you digital signature, I will not give you books of accounts, right? That is against our ethics, so one should not do it. Then there are other practical issues. I'm not going in detail of this, but there are certain auditing issues are there, and number of clauses in our schedule 2 are related to that. when we conduct an audit or do such financial statements reporting, we have to take care of many things. Many times we in a balance sheets and profit and loss account, we are not taking utmost care in respect of certain things. I'll explain this by way of couple of cases only. Now, in one case, what happened was there was some huge amount pending loan amount was there. Say for example, for the benefit of understanding, say 3 crores and 40 lakhs. 3 crores was loan amount, 40 lakhs was accumulated interest. On the last day, 31st March, their entry came in a bank statement of 3 crores rupees, and that loan amount was squared off. And that 3 crores was shown as loan from others. Now, auditors signed the balance sheet saying loan from others, and 40 lakhs rupees was shown on the banker's name as an accumulated interest still to be paid. Now, he was not knowing anything. He might have inquired also. The fact of that matter was that 3 crore loan was taken over by an asset reconstruction company. And the name of that asset reconstruction company was not there in the balance sheet. In a court of law, their claim became weak. And that asset reconstruction company filed a case against the chartered accountant, saying that you have not disclosed the material facts. CA took a plea that no, it was disclosed in the loan only. I had raised the queries, but it was not answered to us. Now, friends, disclosure of material facts means what? When it's a company, we have to adhere to Schedule 3. Schedule 3 requires us to give a proper disclosure of loans. Now, if you are not doing it, we are not disclosing the material facts in the financial statements. If at all it is inquiry were made and the answer was not received, perhaps the qualification or at least some kind of a note in that regard. It is there in front of your screen. If you are not able to obtain the sufficient information, you should always highlight that in your qualification. Otherwise, you cannot say that I had orally asked, but I have not received, but I have written, but I have not received. What can I do? You can always do some things in this regard when you are signing the balance sheet. So therefore, in auditing principles also, there is a fundamental principle of professional competence and due care. Now, fundamental principle of code of ethics, or rather ethical principle, internationally accepted ethical principle is professional competence and due care. So we have to take due care. We have to take care of our schedules, our law, our standards, and whatever is there. And we have to disclose this information according to it. I can give you one more, professional competence. Now, what do you mean by professional competence? I can give you one more, a very interesting case here. There was a company, a small-time construction company, which was doing an activity, one job at a time. In a year, it so happened that there was no job on hand because, one job at a time they were doing. After completion of one job, the next job they were doing. A very small company. So in a year, it so happened that there was no construction job on hand. And whatever money was there, surplus was there. And therefore, in the next year, the company did not have any fixed assets per se. So the next year, their balance sheet contained the investment in shares and mutual funds, and income, major income was dividend or interest from earned from that. Now, auditor felt that there's no business carried out at all. He gave that note also, no construction activity was carried out, so on and so forth, and signed this balance sheet. Professional competence means we must know when we are signing regarding whatever is applicable laws in this regard, especially the financial statements. Many of you may be knowing that there is a Reserve Bank of India guideline which says that if in a company more than 50% of assets are financial assets and more than 50% of income is a financial income, that company is NBFC and it has to take a registration from Reserve Bank of India in that regard. And if it has not taken a registration, auditor should make a special report and point it out to Reserve Bank of India. In fact, now you know that in new Caro, there's a last clause which says that if it's an NBFC, whether it is an NBFC and if so, whether it has taken registration or not. It has come from that problem only. Many of our chartered accountants colleagues are not aware of this kind of a provision. So whenever we are doing, in fact, whenever there is a different activity than the regular activity, our eyes should open and we must check whether there are any other law is applicable in this regard. Now, These cases have been referred to disciplinary benches by the ROC and Reserve Bank of India intermittently against the chartered accountants. And many chartered accountants, this is a material misstatement. Not giving a material fact about this. So professional competence is not there to carry out these activities. Next, is solicitation and promotion and advertisements. I'm not going in detail of that because this itself can take 1.5 hours. But as a professional, again, the last, as Kotha has explained, fundamental principle. The last fundamental principle talks about professional behavior. Now, what is professional behavior? If we start doing a solicitation or promotion like any other businessman, doing a cheap kind of an advertisements, doing these kind of things, whether it's a professional behavior. And from that perspective, clauses 5, 6, and 7 of part 1 of first schedule are very important. As I said, I'll just take an overview of that because we don't have time, that much time to tackle it in detail. Perhaps there can be a great one full session on this. Now, we are not allowed to have rowing inquiries, typically a young chartered accountant when becomes takes a COP, young chartered accountant, he starts writing to everyone, I am doing this practice, so if anything is there, kindly let me know. So we are not allowed to secure the professional work by any such means. Now, clause 6 talks about solicitation. We are not allowed to solicit the clients or professional work directly or indirectly by circular, advertisement, personal communication, or interview, or any other means. As far as advertisement is concerned, it is only with respect to solicitation. There's a clause 7 which give one exception. I will talk to that later. But we are not, as per this clause, we are not allowed to do any kind of a solicitation. There are two exceptions to it. One, we can respond to tenders. We can apply to any other chartered accountant in practice. Now, very important, application or request to invite secure professional work from another chartered accountant in practice. So another means one. So we can at a time request to one chartered accountant in practice, right, for a professional work. So if I'm a practicing chartered accountant, I can write to another chartered accountant in practice. So if you have any work to give, kindly give it to me. Please remember, I have seen many on WhatsApp, youngsters are saying that we are expert in this. So kindly, if any work has to be done, I'll do it. WhatsApp group, although it may be of chartered accountant, it is not another chartered accountant. You are not requesting to another chartered accountant. You are requesting to a wholesale chartered, many chartered accountants at a time, right? And in that group, there can be another chartered accountant, some chartered accountant who are not in practice. You don't know also. So please let us avoid such kind of a thing. Yes, one chartered accountant at a time, I can even write for securing the professional work. Second exception is responding to the tender inquiries, right? There is a tendering guideline. If a tendering guide, as per tendering guideline issued by ICI, you are responding to a tender, there is no violation of this. There cannot be, it will not be treated as a solicitation. But other than that, if we do any kind of a solicitation by circular or personal communication or interview, when we are interviewed, say we are interviewed on budget on a television channel, and there some questions are asked, and then we say that no, you can very well approach to me later. I can answer your queries, any such queries at all. So this would amount to solicitation. So as I said, these are the exceptions. One is personal communication and tender. Now, tendering guidelines, I'll just briefly touch upon, allows us to respond to the tender only if the areas or the services are exclusively reserved for a chartered accountant. The services, it allows us to respond to the tender if the areas or services are open to all other professionals. So the services can be divided in two parts. Areas or services which are exclusively reserved for chartered accountant. Typically, by law, say Companies Act, the statutory audit is reserved for chartered accountant. Trust Act, trust audits are reserved. Certain laws specify that this should be done only by chartered accountant, or certifications may be there. Whereas some other services where it is open to other professionals also. For example, internal audit, due diligence service, funding, or consultation regarding GST. Now, the tendering guideline says that if it is open to other professionals, right? You can very well apply for the tenders, no problem at all. But if it is services exclusive for chartered accountants, the response cannot be given to the tender unless the minimum fees is prescribed in that. So one has to be very careful in this regard when responding to the tender. No at all, you can respond to the tenders. There are other issues regarding this solicitation promotion. As I said, I'm not going in detail of that, but factual advertisement or factual, regarding say a change in the office or employment in a firm, these things can be done only with a factual information without adding any kind of a solicitory flavor to it. So even a greeting cards, etc., can be given. Invitations can be given to a chartered, to our friends or clients, so on and so forth. It cannot be generally given. Now, 2-3 important aspects in this regard. Whether a chartered accountant in practice can register in any network which is not registered with the institute. Typically there are informal networks are there from other professionals, other business persons. Now, we are not allowed. There is a proper announcement in this regard. There was a judgment also in this regard in a disciplinary matter. We are not allowed to be a member of any network which is not a network of chartered accountant and which is not registered with the institute. Even if there is a network of chartered accountant and not registered with the institute, we cannot be a part of it, right? So it has to be registered with the institute. Now, this is a physical network I'm talking about. There can be a virtual network of aggregators. Many times we are approached that we are keeping a data of these chartered accountants. So kindly register yourself, pay a nominal fee. We will give you professional work. Now, these service provider aggregators, we are not allowed to register ourselves again. Now, people are always feeling that why we are not giving these opportunities to CAs. So for that purpose, Ethical Standard Board itself has brought out the CA Connect portal in this regard. Now, this CA Connect portal, you can register your CA firm. Now, I would appeal to all the people who are attending, please register your firm on the CA Connect portal. You can find it on the ESB portal or ESB web page, also on the ICI website. You can very well register your firm. You can mention there your geographical area, that is branches, etc., etc. Of course, registered with the institute. You can also mention the services which you are giving, not clients, but services which you are giving. Now, if at all somebody wants to check the chartered accountants in Bangalore, giving certain areas, you can very well go on the CA Connect portal, find out the chartered accountant in Bangalore in this regard. But other than this, outside service provider aggregators, please don't become a member over there. I can just mention that you might have getting a calls from yellow pages or any such kind of things, right? So please, it is not allowed to us, correct? So we can register in our own portal. Now, clause 7 talks about what we can do on our stationaries and cards and how we can advertise. We are not allowed to advertise any professional attainments or designations or expressions other than chartered accountant, our card, visiting cards, documents, letterheads, etc., signboards, etc. So there are limitations on that. I may have a different social engagements in this regard. I can have a social card for that. But on my practice firm card, I cannot have any such engagements or any such attainments expressed there. Right? So CA degrees, which degrees are allowed? Right? So only degree of in universities established by law in India and recognized by the central governments, or any title indicating a membership of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India or any other institution recognized by the central government or by the council. Only these degrees are allowed to be disclosed on the card. As far as diplomas is concerned, only the ICI diplomas are allowed to be disclosed. Now, mind you, it is a diploma and not certificates. To my mind, there are 4 or 5 diplomas of the institute. That is DISA, BIRM, Diploma in Management and Business Finance, Diploma in International Taxation, right? So other than that, there are no diplomas of the institute. So we have seen the cards where the certified forensic auditor is mentioned. So that is not allowed. It's a certificate course. You cannot mention the certificate course on the card. You cannot mention, it is there on your screen, president of so and so club. You cannot mention that. Two, you cannot mention the specialization also. Say I'm an ITAT lawyer, or I'm a GST expert, or a head vertical of GST. That kind of a thing cannot be mentioned on card. Two specializations are allowed, that is insolvency professional and registered valuer. Other than that, it cannot be allowed. Similarly, we must be very careful about disclosing our designation. See, chartered accountant is my designation, right? FCA is my degree. Company secretary is a designation. FCS or ACS is a degree. We are allowed to put other degrees, but designation, if it's my professional card, only the chartered accountancy designation is allowed. I cannot write chartered accountant and company secretary. I can write FCA, FCS. I can write that, right? But designation, only chartered accountant can be written, right? We can go through this. I'm just rushing. As I said, that there is a proviso to this clause which allows us to give advertisements or make advertisement in a form of write-up. Now, what does that write-up? Now, if the write-up is prepared as per the advertisement guidelines, and then we are allowed to circulate that write-up in print or electronic mode also. So, these write-up guidelines are there on your screen. I'm not going in detail of that. We had allowed this time in World Congress to give write-ups in the souvenir which was printed by the Institute to Indian Chartered Accountant firms, and I've got a very good response. So this information, of course, it was in this as per the write-up guidelines, advertisement guidelines only. Going further, we cannot go on a third-party platform except for the consultancy and advice work. There also, we cannot have our attainments and our contact details, etc., to be allowed to be printed or shown on their websites. Right? We cannot do such kind of indirect solicitations also. Telephone directories, of course, we can have it, but of course, we can have our name printed in that, but there is a way and mean, a logical sequence, no problem if we go in that regard. As I said, there can be one full lecture on solicitation and advertisements, etc. I'm not going in detail. I've just touched upon some practical issues. The another practical issue which I would like to discuss is preparation of certificates and reports. Cotha ji explained that provisional balance sheet and all. Now, whether we can do it. See, friends, there is a clause 3, part 1, second schedule, which very clearly says that chartered accountant in practice shall not permit his name or name of his firm to be associated with in connection with an estimate of earnings contingent upon future transactions, which may lead to believe that we are vouching for the accuracy of the forecast. So project report signing and etc., it is not correct, because what we are signing in that project report, are you saying that in future it is going to happen? It is not allowed. Clause 3 very clearly prohibits us in that regard. So how to certificate? Client comes to us that bankers are asking that this project report has to be certified by chartered accountant. I take full session on certificates and reports, and that time I specifically tell members that we have to ask questions from ourselves that why bank is asking our signature. Does the bank want to certify that this will happen? If so, are we eligible to do that? When the provisional balance sheet is to be signed, does that mean that we know that this is going to happen? It is not possible, friends, and therefore it is not allowed for us to sign. But yes, Institute recognizes that bankers require some kind of a certification. And when you ask the question to yourself that what is the bank want? The bank perhaps wants that whatever projections have been made, it has been made in a logical manner. There is some base to it. If there is no base to it, then at least some assumptions are given. And on the basis of that assumption, these have been prepared. And that's why Institute has come up with the Standards on Assurance Engagement 3400, which talks about examination of prospective financial information. If you go through it, as I said, this is not a session on certificate and report. A Bangalore branch wants to call me physically, I can come there on this, right? But we can have this done as per these Standards on Assurance Engagement. Many times the ITR copies are to be certified, net worth certificates are to be issued. How to prepare it? I'm not going in detail of it, but friends, please don't do it blindly as the client requires. There are on your screen, there are the various standards which have been issued by the Institute. There are guidance note on reports and certificate for special purposes. We can apply our logic, apply our complete professional competence, and prepare these certifications according to these standards. Right? That much only I can tell. Then there is another important thing which is institute has come up, ethical standard board has come up in a volume 1 regarding the know your client norms. Friends, there are a lot of issues regarding the money laundering or benami transactions, so on and so forth. To tell you very frankly and accept it very candidly, many times we conduct an audit for files which are tax audit, especially for files which are coming from the tax consultant. At times, I'm not saying everyone, but some of us not taking the due care with respect to the client. And therefore, this is a mandatory function which has come up by the institute, that know your client. We must have a detailed compilations. We can just go through it, right? It has been very clearly mentioned that what kind of an information has to be taken from the client, and you must update that information periodically. So that is very important. The last issue before going to the new provisions is regarding the fees overdues. There was some issue regarding in this also, that if my last year's fees or my fees is pending from a client for a certain period of time, whether I should accept an audit or not. The code does not prohibit you from accepting an audit. Code only says that if your fees is pending for a substantial period of time and it is a substantial amount, just like loan from the client, loan to the client, then perhaps it would amount to a loan, and then it may so happen that you are interested. There is a financial conflict. There is a direct conflict because you are lender to that client. Now, as a lender, whether you can certify, you have to assess. The code does not say that don't do it. Code only says that you have to assess whether you are independent in this regard. Correct? So whether it is proper on my part to have been reappointed. There are certain safeguards also mentioned in volume 1 in this regard, that you can partially recover this fee from the client, or you can get your work reviewed from the independent person in this regard, so that independence is established, right? But code does not say that you should not accept. Code says that assess yourself whether you are stepping into the shoes of the lender or what. So in fact, this is a good provision for us. We can tell our clients, see, this would happen to you, that then I may not able to do an audit also. And you cannot go to any other auditor also, because if my fees is not paid, right? There's a guideline of the institute that if the undisputed fees is not paid, the another chartered accountant shall not accept an audit also. So you must highlight this client. This will help us in recovery of our dues. Friend, these were certain issues. Now I'm just going to touch up or discuss very briefly the deferred. There were 3 provisions in volume 1 of Code of Ethics, which were deferred earlier. Now it is being made applicable. These 3 provisions are regarding responding to the non-compliance with laws and regulations, relative size of the fees, and tax services to the audit clients. Now, I'm just briefing you, friend. These 3 services were earlier, these 3 provisions were there in the volume 1 of Code of Ethics, as has been published in 2019. And it was adopted in 2020. It was adopted by the volume 1 was adopted by the council. But as you know, that time the COVID situation was there, and these 3 are, especially this fees, relative size, and NOCLA are new provisions to us. And therefore, the council thought that time that some more awareness has to be created, and then only we can bring this provisions. And therefore, it was deferred up to March 2022. After I became a chairman of Ethical Standard Board in March 22, we thought that it was not possible to implement in that form immediately. And therefore, we sought 6 months extension from the council, which council gave us that time. And we came up with this provision in I can say, a slightly revamped manner with the proper discussion with many of the chartered accountants. And these provisions are become applicable from 1st October 2022. While discussing these provisions, 2-3 important nomenclatures have to be understood. What is professional accountants? As you know, that volume 1 always talks about the professional accountants, because this is nothing but an adoption of International Code of Ethics from ASBA. Now, professional accountants has been defined as a chartered accountant, individual who is having a member of an Institute of Chartered Accountants of India. So we have to understand in that respect. Then what is a public interest entity? Now, our Volume 1 Code of Ethics very clearly defines what is a public interest entity. It's a listed entity or an entity which is defined by a regulation or legislation as a public interest entity for which the audit requirements are similar of that kind of a listed entities. So typically, the huge corporations where these have been defined as a public interest entities, the local authorities, etc., all these things are public interest entities, right? Because the requirements of independence or audit in this regard are just like a listed entities. So further, we have gone ahead in this also. Our code has gone ahead in this, which ASBA has done later on, that banks and insurance companies will be treated as public interest entities also. So these are the public interest entities for the purpose of understanding. Now, what is those charged with governance? Typically, if you have to talk in terms of company, it's a management is something different, and a board of directors is something different. So board of directors is having a oversight over the governance. As far as there can be a corporate entity also, we're seeing the oversight, having oversight. So persons or organizations who are having the oversight or have overseeing the strategic direction of an entity are treated as are those charged with governance. So as I said, in case of companies, typically we have to segregate. The management is different and board is a people who are those charged with governance. Having that understanding in mind, let us see these three provisions very quickly. First provision which we'll see is a fees relative size. Now what happens is many times the client becomes so important to us, or one single client becomes so important in terms of fees that we start depending upon that client. And Cotha ji has explained the threats. There can be a self-interest threat, or there can be an intimidation threat also, because when the client becomes very important and the fees from him, we start depending on that clients start dictating the words to us, and perhaps there is a danger to our independence, especially typically when we are doing a statutory audit or an audit where the independence requirements are there. So from that perspective, this provision has been thought about. What is the rationale when a total fee is generated from an audit client? Now, when we talk about audit client, it is not only that client, but also sister concerns of that client, the related concerns of that client. I need not go in detail of that related concerns. We also know subsidiaries, holding companies, or a company where the firms or the trust where the directors are major trustees there over there. These kind of entities are in that group. So from that group, whatever fees we receive, and if there is one statutory audit in that group, right, now the dependence will be there on that group, whether in that statutory audit will be able to have an independence, whether there will be a self-interest and intimidation threat. All these issues are there. So from that rationale, these provisions are there in International Code of Ethics. We have not exactly taken the same provisions from International Code of Ethics, ASBA Code of Ethics, but we have, I cannot say diluted, but we have adopted in a different manner for public interest entities and non-public interest entities. Now, what are these provisions? If I am doing an audit of a client which is not a public interest entity, I'm not saying that the independence requirements are less, but certainly the independence parameters can be different in this regard. And therefore, the provisions, we have bifurcated the provisions as far as these two entities are concerned. I can say the extent of compromise of independence can be different in a non-public interest entities as compared to the public interest entities. So in a non-public interest entities, for 2 consecutive years, the gross annual professional fees from that client or related entities represent more than 50% of the total fees received by a practicing chartered accountant, right? Then received by the practicing chartered accountant, then definitely there is some threat. Now, therefore, it is thought that this shall be disclosed to the institute. Now, it has been mentioned that the mechanism will be discussed later, but this should be disclosed to the institute. Now, internationally, the provision was this should be disclosed to the client. Now, friends, in Indian scenario, if we start disclosing the client that no, see, you are giving me more than 40% of fees, that client will become very important and he will start dictating the terms. So we thought that rather than disclosing to the institute, let us disclose it to the, disclosing to client, let us disclose it to the institute. Now, does that mean that I cannot do the work? No, it is not like that, right? I'll explain that in a further slide, but yes, the mechanism will be explained to you. For 2 consecutive years, say for example, I'm doing a company audit and there's a related entity, a partnership firm, I'm doing a taxation work, there's another trust which I'm also doing some trust work over there, there's another LLP or there's another company of which I'm doing only a tax work. Now the total fees from that group is more than 40% of my total fees. If all these entities are non-public interest entities, then the entity of whom I'm doing an audit is non-public interest entities, then in that case, if it is more than 40% for 2 consecutive years, I have to disclose this fact to the institute. What can be done of that, I will discuss later. Now, this ceiling is not applicable if my total fees is not more than 20 lakhs rupees. So for a small and medium practitioner, we have taken care, right? If my total fees is not more than 20 lakhs rupees, this provision is not at all applicable. This ceiling is not at all applicable. So I can have one client also. This ceiling is also not applicable for empaneled work, so to say. Fees received from an empaneled work from nationalized banks, public institutions, public sector companies, government companies, so on and so forth, right? Where the appointment is made by government or regulators. So when I'm calculating this, say nationalized bank fees received and all these things will be excluded from this. Next, in case of a public interest entities, this slab is reduced from 40% to 20%. Because as I explained, that in public entities, perhaps we are treating that the parameters of independence have to be very stringent. People, stakeholders are large in numbers. So one has to be much more stringent in parameters, and therefore from 40% we have reduced it to 20%. Rather, I will say in other words, in an international scenario, it is I think 15%. We have taken that percentage to 20% in case of public interest entities, and we have relaxed it for non-public interest entities to 40%. Exceptions will remain same, mechanism will remain same. Now, what happens after 2 years? Now, after 2 years, say 2 years, it is more than 40% or 20%. After 2 years, if it is continued, then every year I have to disclose the matter to the institute. Now, what institute will do, as I said, I will discuss it. Now, what is the proposed mechanism? Now, we will have a format and timeline of reporting it to the institute. The ESB is meeting after a few days, and we may discuss this in this, how to report it and all, because council has asked us to produce it before the council, how the reporting will be done. Now, ESB will also form, ESB means Ethical Standard Board, will also form a mechanism for further steps to be taken in this regard. Whether we are going for a mandatory peer review or a quality review after a certain stage, or what kind of a declarations will be taken from the members regarding independence, that I am reporting to the institute, but declaration can be given that we are taking independence care in this regard, 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever it may be. The mechanism is just being formulated. In fact, I would suggest the members also to suggest whatever way you want to suggest in this. So that is regarding the fees relative size. Let's go to the next provision, that is the taxation service to the audit clients. So these are all provisions which are in relation to the audits. Now, for an audit client, we are allowed to give certain taxation services, but we have to take care in certain cases. There are certain prohibitions also are there in this regard. As regard tax return preparation, there are no threat. Usually there are no threat, but friends, it is tax return preparations. So administrative services, right? That section we referred earlier must be referred to. So the calculations must be approved by the client, and there must be a proper intimation from the client to upload it. So there is no issues in this regard. As regards tax calculation for the purpose of preparing an accounting entries. Now there is a self-review threat, because I am only suggesting the calculations and I am only reviewing these entries. So that cannot be done. and therefore appropriate safeguard has to be done. If my audit team and my tax team has to be different, and proper review has to be done in this regard. The tax calculation should not be done by an auditor if it is a substantial amount as far as current and deferred tax provisions for an audit client for a public interest entity, right? Because that cannot be done, because again, there are many stakeholders in this. Our independence will be definitely tested in this regard. However, if the provision is made and during the audit, I am finding that this provision is not correct, I am bound to suggest. So you can make this, instead of say 15 lakhs rupees, make a provision of 20 lakhs rupees. I can always suggest that. So that review can be always done. Now, pardon me for this presentation issue. Tax planning for other tax planning and other tax advisory services. Whether we can do it, again, self-review and advocacy thread will happen. When I'm doing a tax planning and tax advisory services to audit client, these issues are going to come. And for professional service, separate team review also can be done. Again, auditors shall not provide tax planning and other advisory services to audit client when the effectiveness of the tax advice depends on the particular accounting treatment or vice versa. Now, if my accounting treatment I'm auditing depends upon the tax services, tax advice, or vice versa, then definitely these are two completely interconnected activities, and I cannot be an advisory capacity at the same time. I cannot be an auditor also, and therefore this is not allowed. But otherwise, if it's a minor in nature, I can have a proper review process done for that purpose. Valuations, definitely, again, there are certain restrictions. One has to be seeing that if it's a subjective area and it's having a great impact, valuation, audit firm should not be doing it. As far as non-public interest entity is concerned, if it's a public interest entity, even if it is not a subjective area, if it is having an impact in individually or aggregate, if the material impact is there on financial statements, the valuation cannot be done by an audit firm. As far as representation services are concerned, assistance in resolution of tax dispute. Now see, it might create a self-review and advocacy threat. The appropriate safeguard have to be adopted. Now the code says that such representation, assistance in resolution on tax disputes shall not be provided if it involves acting as an advocate for an audit client in a court, or if amounts involved are material in the financial statement on which the firm is expressing an opinion. Now, materiality again is a factual scenario. So what is material or not, that is up to you to decide. But what does this say is that if it's a huge amount which is having an impact on the financial statement and you are representing there, then perhaps you have to take care that there is no advocacy threat. Advocacy threat, Cotha has explained that advocacy threat means I'm advocating what I'm auditing. So when I'm advocating what I'm auditing, naturally there's a threat on audit. I will start thinking from the perspective of advocate while doing an audit, and that threat will result into lack of due diligence in audit, and therefore one has to be very careful when doing a tax representation services. Now, we can act as an advocate. We can advocate. There is no harm, right, before the court for the entities other than court, right? But for court, there is a restriction. We cannot act as an advocate before the court. Now, we have defined what is court for the purpose of this clause. For the purpose of this clause, court will not include tribunal. It means that we can give an assistance in resolution of tax disputes till commissioner and tribunal level. For court, we cannot do that, right? So that issue has been tackled by the ESB. Next, so very important and perhaps a completely new phenomena for us. Chairman, I will conclude it in 10-15 minutes, then we can have some 10 minutes question answer session. Is that okay?
Sir, okay, sir.
This is important. Yeah. Now, non-compliance with laws and regulations, right? Responding to non-compliance with laws and regulations. We already have a standards on auditing SA 250, where this responding to the other laws and regulation, non-compliance regulation has been explained. Here we are tackling the ethical issues. There, what is being discussed is when non-compliance is there with respect to financial laws having a financial impact, we have to respond to it. The ethical principle go much beyond that, right? If it's a NOCLAR means non-compliance with laws and regulations means any act of omission or commission committed by the client or employer, right, with respect to prevailing laws and regulation. Now, it is very difficult to recognize this situation, and bring it to the notice. As far as financial angle is concerned, we are already explaining it. But as far as non-financial angle is concerned, it's an ethical issue, and we are this NOCLAR principle says that while providing the professional service to a client or an employer, if we come across any instance of non-compliance and laws and regulation, right, committed or about to be committed by client or employer, right, we should bring the by the people charged with governance, by those charged with governance or management or employees or client or employer. We may face that, we may come across that. Now, when we come across that, financial impact definitely we will consider in a financial reporting. But other than financial impact also, or if the financial impact is not determinable, that also we cannot simply turn blind eye to it, right? It is our ethical responsibility towards the public interest to not to turn the blind eye and bring it to the notice of those charged with governance. I'm going to tackle only section 360 as far as NOCLAR is concerned, because 260 is applicable for members in service. You can see from this slide that client or an employer. So employee also have that NOCLAR obligation, but I'm not going to discuss it today. As far as chartered accountant in practice are concerned, while doing a professional duty of the audit, if you find such issue, it may not have an impact on the financial statements, but it has other impact on the existence of the client. I'll explain that. So typically there are two types of laws which are a direct impact on financial statement, where we can determine the material amounts, right? And there definitely we disclose as per that standards on auditing. But there are other laws, right, which are fundamental to the business of the entities. Perhaps the violation of that law or non-compliance of that law, the impact, financial impact cannot be estimated at that point of a time. But yes, if we go in detail of that, it may have a very grave adverse impact on the client. I'll give a very simple example. Now, ASBA has given some examples: fraud, corruption, money laundering, security market, data protection, environmental protection, public health safety, etc., etc. These are just examples. I'll give a very simple example. While doing an audit, of course, this is a very crude example I am saying. While doing an audit, suppose I find that there is a penalty on my client for violation of environmental law. The penalty amount of say 50,000 rupees, say for example. Now that 50,000 may not be material as far as the financial statements are concerned, or even if it is non-material, it's mentioned in the notes to accounts. My job is over as far as financial disclosure is concerned. But does that mean that my ethical disclosure or ethical responsibility is over? Today, the client has violated or not complied with an environmental law. What can be its repercussions? Whether the repercussion will turn out to be a disaster for public health, whether the repercussion would lead to a closure of business, whether the repercussion would lead to a relocation of the business. Now, if that thing happens, perhaps the stakeholders, the shareholders, right, they will be left with complete, they will be left in complete disarray. From that perspective, NOCLAR principle says that whenever you observe such kind of a thing, please don't turn blind eye to it because it is not having any kind of a financial impact in that year, right? While explaining that, there is of course what is not in the scope. If you see on the screen, matter which are clearly inconsequential or professional misconduct which are not related to business. Say employee has done something, employer has done something, or a client has done something in a personal capacity, right? But of course, it is not having impact on the business. Say non-compliance other than the client or the employer, when people who are outsiders. Now, these are not covered here, correct? But other than that, which is having an impact on the businesses, one has to take note of it. What is there in the scope? It is a knocklar by the client, those charged with the governance of the client, management of the client, and other individuals working for and under the direction of the client. Now, any such non-compliance done by them, it is going to harm the client, its existence of the client, then we must go in detail of that. Now, how to go about it? Let's see it in this slide. But before that, people felt, as I said, that this provision is completely new and this is going to have a great impact on us. So let us see how, because in India, when we apply certain principles in code of ethics, we are much worried because how the regulators will look into it. So tomorrow, if I'm not complying with it, regulators should not make me guilty of it because something which is ethical in nature, but by mistake, by sheer what you can say, oversight, I'm not doing it. And therefore, we decided to go slow about it. And therefore, it has been made applicable in initial stages to listed entities of which the shares are listed on the recognized stock exchanges, and the entities are having, companies are having more than 250 crores of net worth. So it is applicable in India right now, ethical principles only for selected entities, not all listed entities. But definitely in a time to come, it will become applicable to all the listed entities. Further, it will be applicable only to the audit. Now, audit engagement or audit, we have defined it for the purpose of Section 360 and Section 360. Now, it means that, you can read it, it means a reasonable assurance engagement in which the professional accountant in a public practice expresses an opinion whether the financial statement give true and fair view or not. Otherwise, it would have become applicable to all audits. And therefore, it is being restricted only to the statutory audits now. So it is only for statutory audit. It is only for the entities, companies which are listed on recognized stock exchanges, of which shares are listed on recognized stock exchanges and having a net about 250 crores. So coming back again, when such instances are observed, it is our responsibility that on timely basis, it should be brought to the notice of people who are at the helm of the affairs. Now, typically we feel that the managing director is at the helm of the affairs. No, it is the people, those charged with governance, because they are ultimately responsible for that, right? So these timely steps have to be taken, because otherwise it will cause a potential harm, to the interest of that entity, investors, creditors, etc., etc., etc. Now, how to go about it? We have to find out the detailed information of this matter. How to get this information? Now, slide talks about many things. I'm just going to give an overview because we have to understand first whether the management understand this law, other regulatory provisions, what are the requirements of the client. Now, whether this this understanding given by management is correct, whether I should take anybody else or whether I should advise the client to take expert opinion in this regard. So whatever opinion, whatever our doubts are there, we can ask it. Now, does that mean that I should know that law? No, it doesn't mean. I will take same example. I find that 50,000 rupees penalty is applied for this environmental violation. I'm not an expert in environmental law, but yes, I can ask some management regarding what are these issues, what are these violations, what are its repercussions. I must assess myself. I must document. I'm coming to documentation later. That regarding management knowledge, management information in this regard, I can ask the management to take other legal opinion or expert opinion also, right? And I can, like that, I can obtain an understanding of the matter, going in detail of that. Having understood the matter, I have to address it now. I have to tell that these are the things I have gathered, such and such information, and according to me, such harm is going to happen. So this I must escalate within the organization. I must escalate to those charged with governance. If I find that those people at the helm of the affairs are themselves involved in it, or are not taking cognizance of it, and it is really a dangerous situation, if legal and statutory responsibilities are there, then I can disclose it to the regulators or proper authorities also. If legal and regulatory responsibilities are not there, I should not go out because my confidentiality clause is there. Please remember this. In India, we have that in law. It is not only an ethical principle, but law. So legal and regulatory framework is there for outside reporting. We should report it to the respective regulators. Say, for example, fraud has occurred. Now, SEBI requirements, RBI requirements are there that fraud should be reported. So we have to report it. I cannot, I can escalate the matter if it is not, they are not taking it corrective action, or if at all it is of high magnitude, I have to report it. I must insist upon them that they should take a timely action to rectify, remediate, make a proper system for deterrence. Proper disclosures are there, right? I must insist upon them. And I must communicate with those charged with governance or wherever it is required with the outsiders. Now, this is the typical principle of NOCLAR. Now, this is extendable to the group also. When I'm doing a group audit, say a consolidation audit, right? I'm a group auditor and I find that some issue is there in a component entity. Then I must highlight that to component auditor also, subject to these provisions, subject to the provisions of confidentiality. I'm not going in detail because this is much more technical as far as this thing is concerned. Now, what further action? Now, determining the further action. So I have to assess that what is an appropriateness of the response of the management, whether those charged with governance are capable enough to take an action. Professional judgment has to be exercised, right? And then I must suggest it. Now, I repeat this line, I mentioned this line, in making this determination, the accountant shall consider RITP. What is RITP? Whether a reasonable and informed third party would be likely to conclude that accountant has acted in an appropriate manner. What does that mean? That means that let us ask to ourselves that if I am a general public, whether I would have satisfied with an act of an auditor, right? So that is RITP, reasonable and informed third party. What they could have thought about it, whether it is correct, auditor is doing. So according to that, I must act in this regard. Now, as I said, further actions can be disclosing the matter to proper authority if it is allowed. There is an exceptional circumstances. If I feel that I'm not able to go ahead with that, I can withdraw from the engagement also. But just because I have withdrawn, I cannot preclude from saying that, okay, I've withdrawn, so there's no need of reporting to the entity, reporting to the authority. If it is required by law and regulation, I must report it also. So merely withdrawal will not make me come out of that obligation, right? So at times both is needed, both I have to do, correct? So withdrawal also can be done from that. Now, I'll just keep this line, determining whether to disclose the matter to the appropriate authority. Very importantly, when I withdraw from that, my responsibility does not end. Suppose I have reported to the respective authority and I've withdrawn from the engagement because there is a non-compliance going on and which is going to have a repercussions in future. Management is not doing it. Those charged with governance are also not acting on it. That I am not discharged of the responsibility. I must also communicate because the new auditor will communicate with me. I must also communicate to that auditor that see such and such thing has happened and that's why I have withdrawn from this assignment. Right? So that responsibility has also been casted on the previous auditor in this NOCLAR. Please remember that. Now in this NOCLAR, there is one clause that is of imminent breach, which we have repealed from the code, which is not be applicable in India. Imminent breach is typically that something has happened. It is not non-compliance at the moment, but it may lead to non-compliance. Now, see, we have decided consciously, Ethical Standard Board and Council, of course, that not to make this applicable in India because it will extend to a very unimaginable extent, this provision. And that's why we have not applied it. As far as documentation is concerned, I have mentioned that how the management has responded to it, how we have done, returned to it, how we have gathered the information, how we have responded to the management, how the management has responded to it, what is the approach of those charged with governance, what action has been taken. Now, all these things have to be recorded and documented. of course, the guidance will be there from the Ethical Standard Board in this regard in the days to come, because this is a huge work on us. I would definitely invite your participation also in this regard. Although it is applicable only to the selected entities at this time, people were asking me. I had at least 5-6 meetings and more than 100 firms throughout the country who are doing an audit of such listed entities were contacted, discussed the provision in detail, and we have brought this after a lot of deliberations. But we need more participation from the members in this regard to bring about the documentation and related issues. Friends, this is going much beyond the audit, and it is required internationally that ethically we must do a public service. What is audit? Audit is more than professional. It is of course a professional service, but in addition to that, it's a public service also when it comes to when the stakeholders are large. And so it's an onerous responsibility. At the same time, it's a completely, I can say, very responsible. We have been looked upon in a very high esteem when giving this responsibility. So let's think positively. Let me repeat that it does not mean that I must know these laws. It does not mean that I must go with that mindset to find out such flaws. It only means that during the course of my audit, if I find such things, and therefore audit documentation is also relevant from that perspective. So during the course of audit, if I find this, it is evident that I was supposed to know this, then definitely I must inquire into it. It is not that I must know this law. I must inquire, take these steps, document these steps, and I think you will be satisfying these what you can say principles of NOCLAR. And these are the things which we are doing. It is there in front of you. The FAQ will be coming in this regard. Your volume 1 is always available. You can always attend these programs of ESB, especially in this regard. We will be having more awareness program as and when we are having more FAQs and material available on these 3 provisions, especially NOCLAR. Because as I said, slowly it is going to become applicable to the all listed entities, right? So we have to be prepared for this. It is accepted internationally. We are doing it in a phased manner, but definitely we are recognizing our responsibility in this regard. I also invite your participation in Ethical Standard Board in making the suggestions, participating in certain kinds of forming this or raising certain questions which can be a part of an FAQ documentation standard. It can bring it in an Ethical Standard Board. So I end this with this famous quote of Swami Vivekananda. I have been mentioning in a conflict from that perspective. Let your heart talk to you, and if your heart says it is correct, you are definitely doing a right thing, correct, and properly documented on your side also. Thank you very much for this opportunity, and I'm able to discuss required by the branch. I'm free for discussions on questions. There have been certain suggestions to share this presentation. Of course, this presentation will be shared by me and Ethical Standard Board to the branch, and branch can share this in a proper manner, or we can host it on ESB also. Thank you very much for patient listening.
Thank you, sir. It was a nice session. More than 1,000 members has been registered for today's program. It shows the importance of the speaker also.
Oh.
Nicely discussed. Members are enjoyed and well received points, sir. Thanks a lot, and thanks on behalf of Bangalore branch of ICSR. Can we go for question and answer session, sir? There are a lot of questions are there.
Sure. No problem.
The first question is Mohan Jacob has raised. Instances of professional negligence and misconduct have been accumulating for a number of years. Can a complaint be filed only if it is not more than 6 months old?
So Kotha ji, you can answer it.
Yeah. I will answer. If something you want to add, you can add it. As
Yeah,
of there is no regulations which says that it should be within 6 months or time limit is not there. But as far as regular thing is concerned, it's better to that complaint should be raised then and there itself, not wait for 4 or 5 years to raise a complaint. So we may also doubt the efficiency or what is that he was doing for more than 6 months or more than 1 year. So the case itself will become weak after if he does after
correct. Next
a
one.
period. Yeah.
Whether a practicing CA is required to obtain special permission to become a member of board of studies in any college, whether this service is covered under general permission.
Let me tell you that if Ashish, our Secretary of Ethical Standard Board, we have taken this decision that such members can become a member of Board of Studies. Of course, it's honorary job, honorary. If it is a paid and a paid employment type job, definitely it will become other engagements, and that is not allowed. Or special permission will have to be taken in that regard, which perhaps may not be given. It will become an employment that. But yes, honorary member of Board of Studies of say educational institution, etc., it is allowed.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. Sir, one more big question is there. In one case where our audit fees of previous year of client are pending, and client appointed another auditor, we gave our objection.
Chairman, I have read that question. Now the question is like he has taken a NOC from a previous auditor, but it seems that previous auditor has not done the audit. The company would have appointed one more auditor. So the question is how I can know who has been appointed. So as of now, practically, it is not possible for us to know until unless it is like a ROC filing. You can go to the website and see that. But otherwise, non-corporate entities, it is very difficult. We don't have any data, and even I think even Institute is not providing any data as such. So that there will be some practical difficulties.
Thank you, sir. Will practicing CS be professional director without remuneration of a cooperative bank? Is it possible?
Yes, it is allowed.
Yeah, it is allowed.
It's allowed. There should be director simpliciter.
Simpliciter.
Thank you, sir.
Simpliciter.
Auditor,
Not to sit simply, but simpliciter means not sitting simply, but not taking a remuneration or something like that.
Okay. Can auditor of a family-owned private limited company become a trustee in a private trust where settlers are majority shareholders in private limited company?
To my mind, I think there will be a conflict. Where is the question? An auditor of a family-owned private limited company become a trustee? I think it should not. I think it should not as a clear conflict because he is becoming trustee in a private trust where settlers are majority shareholders. Shareholders are there.
Of private limited company.
Shareholders is not an issue. Shareholders will tackle it, but apparently it looks to be a conflict of interest straight away.
See that private company, private limited company has formed a trust where he is becoming or he wanted to.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. It's he is becoming a part of their management, right?
Indirectly,
of the trust.
He is taking care of the trust. Indirectly, he is managing the trust.
So I think there's a conflict. There's a conflict here.
Can CS involve in fundraising services? Debt syndication was not allowed, if I am correct.
No. What is that? Can CA do? Where is
Can
that question?
CS involve in fundraising services? Debt syndication was not allowed.
Involve means what? If professionally you are doing a kind of a bank liaising and fundraising activity, there's no problem at all.
Thank you, sir. Can a director simpliciter get remuneration from a company?
No,
it's very clear.
Are CS in practice allowed to host content on their own YouTube channels? One can find several such channels purportedly
See, this issue is there. We are going to tackle it now. The provision, as it says right now, is you are allowed to upload your educational videos. Now, in that, you should not have you can have your own name. You can say, I can write CA Mangesh Kinare, but I cannot write my firm name and firm contacts, etc., etc.
Correct.
So I can do that. There can be another issues in this, which we have perhaps to tackle also, because YouTube channel, once you start, we may get an other advertisement revenue and etc., etc., etc. So that also is another issue. If we are not getting that, and if we are uploading an educational videos, adhering to whatever guidance has been issued, I think right now there is no problem on that.
Thank you, sir. Is member need to inform the board for doing LLB course?
LLB course.
LLB?
Yes, sir.
No.
No. Educational course, you
Only-
can do it. Recognized degree, you can get it. No problem. You can
That's
print on card
only,
also.
that is only during the articleship that you have to give 112. For a member, there is no 112.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Question one. Last question, I
Question
think.
paper setting, answer script.
Question paper setting, answer script valuation comes under general permission, whether above services rendered to other institutes and educational institutions are also covered under general permission.
No. According to me, no.
You
It
can
will
take a
become-
specific permission in this regard.
Okay.
You can take a specific permission. There is no harm. I mean, there is no problem in this regard.
Okay. Thank you, sir. We'll see some questions in chat and checks.
No, I think one more question was the one. Yeah. Whether will virtual CFO service allowed for practicing CS is there? Something like that.
No, it is not allowed. Practicing CA cannot do virtual CFO services per se. Consultation is different, but virtual CFO terminology, I mean, you are getting involved in the company, right? So even if you are CFO, it's not allowed at the moment.
Thank you, sir. Sir, can CA in
Some
practice
people
hold
have issues.
Okay.
Sorry, yeah.
CA in practice can hold CA and as well as CS CPA certificate simultaneously
CPA certificate. He can hold, but
in US.
practicing,
Yeah.
see, no, you can only have one qualification as practicing. You cannot. You can,
No. We are just in the last meeting, we have decided we can hold a COP, but when you are practicing as CPA, you should not write anywhere as a chartered accountant and vice versa. So suppose you are a
You need to have
CPA.
different two cards.
Yeah. And different way of expressing yourself also. Letterheads and all those things. You cannot have this kind of a intervention in that. Say, for example, you are a US CPA and you are doing a US company audit, you are required to do it here. You can do that, but as a US CPA, you can do it.
Okay, thanks. Can a practicing CA provide educational service?
Educational means
They
what?
are not asked whether running a college or doing a coaching class. That is a question mark. Can you elaborate on that, sir?
College, you can do. See, the teaching hours should not be more than 25 hours per week.
Per week, they can teach without any permission.
that is CA courses, sir.
No. Specific permission is required. But specific permission also can be given only for 25 hours per week. Teaching hours.
Can practicing CA trade in shares, sir?
No. Right now, no.
No, I think allowed.
F&O.
It's simply allowed, sir, I think.
Huh?
It's not allowed, sir, trading in shares.
No. Trading in shares is not allowed.
F&O?
Derivative transaction was allowed in April 21
Ah,
on your own account.
ah,
Share trading is not allowed. Share investment is allowed.
okay. Day trade is not allowed.
Not allowed.
F&O is allowed. Derivatives.
F&O is allowed.
Thank you. And can CA be the author of tax books and mention his firm name on the cover page with his name? Writing a tax book with full details, his firm details.
I think firm name is, I think it is not allowed in the firm name. Name he can print.
He cannot,
आशीष हमारा decision अभी का क्या है? Firm name?
No, firm name it should not come in. Ashish?
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Next question. If a CA is sitting director but also provides some management services and receive remuneration from its parent company, is it allowed?
I missed the question in between. Is
CA sitting director in a company also provides some management services to that company, but
No,
receives remuneration from parent company, not from
in any case, if he gives a management services, he is not a director solicitor, no.
Correct.
So it is not allowed.
Sir,
Sir, I'm missing your voice.
So there's
no,
one.
no, done, sir. All the questions has been done.
No, one
One
question.
more question.
Like one, can a CA in practice? No, 1 second. Can a spouse, brother, or sister of practice in CA provide service of maintenance of books of account and other services of which tax audit is done by that CA? So this is also
Spouse, brother, sister, practicing CA provides service maintenance. See, frankly speaking, it is against the principle of independence because you are doing, you are directly connected with these people, and it won't be seen as independence policy. If there are any specific questions, there are some sub questions because it is not possible to go on answering. You can just post this to esb@ici.in. Right? Let me tell you that there is a feature, perhaps people are not knowing that you can raise the queries. Of course, it should not be a completely personal queries, otherwise it becomes difficult. But on principles, if you want to raise the queries, you can write to esb@ici.in. If these are covered matters, if they are directly covered provisions are there, ESB Secretariat gives you reply immediately. If there are certain matters requiring deliberations, it comes to Ethical Standard Board for discussion. In fact, in the last meeting in the month of October, we had a complete 3.5 hours meeting for discussion of the issues from members. And we deliberated. Perhaps it may not be decided in that meeting. It may require further action, so further study. So it all goes on. So we can raise this issue to Ethical Standard Board. Secondly, please, again, I'm repeating since members are here, you can register yourself on CA Connect portal, your firm, so that people can make use of it. We are right now not able to propagate it in the chambers of commerce, etc., because our members have not registered on it. So if you propagate it, we'll definitely propagate to the chambers of commerce, industry associations. That CA Connect portal contains this data of chartered accountants. Geographically, they can find out the chartered accountants. Yeah.
one question there. What is the difference between investment in shares and dealing in shares?
Day trading and
Question was there. So like
now this is my personal
without taking the what do you call that
delivery
of the thing, delivery of the shares, that will become day trading.
speculation. Day trade.
Means you have to it has to come like you have to take delivery of the shares and you have to hold for some time and then sell it. So it's not that continuously you're doing sitting on the share transaction.
I can answer in one line that it depends on facts of each case.
Facts of that case, correct.
Day trading definitely would amount to trading. But if it is not day trading, if it's a continuous trading on 365 days, I am doing a trading activity, buying, selling, right? However small amount it may be. See, the intention here is that chartered accountant, when we are giving a certificate of practice, it is for doing a practice, full-time practice. When especially you are doing an attest functions, I know that it cannot be a simple parameter for that, but we have to lay down certain parameters. So when we are certifying the financial statements, we are supposed to be in a practice fully. Now, if I start doing the other activities also, whether I'll be able to concentrate on these different kinds of issues which are coming up in the practice, whether I can, be updated, a professional competence which is required. So from that perspective, we are the ESB. I mean, I'm not individually saying it. It's becoming years together. that we should not get involved on regular basis on other activities. Now, as I said, regularity in dealing in shares, it all depends. And that is also a current provision. ESB discusses it every now and then, the new suggestions which are coming up. If you have suggestions, you can always give it to Ethical Standard Board. If it is worth discussing, we'll definitely discuss it.
Can we conclude, sir?
Your choice.
Kotha, sir?
Yeah. Already 3 hours is over. Maybe you can.
Over, sir. Half an hour over.
As he
8:30.
said, like if you have all these queries, you can just list out that and send it to ESB. Maybe even we can use it for preparing the FAQs. Add it for it.
Yeah. See, I'll tell you one more thing. But please, individual queries, better to ask individually. If the principle-based queries are there, you can please write to Ethical Standard Board. Ethical Standard Board will write to you, answer it to you. I would like to draw your attention to one more thing, that recently, I think in the month of June, on 1st July only, I think, Ethical Standard Board has published a book, which is there on the website, on recent decisions of Ethical Standard Board, important decisions of Ethical Standard Board. Where the interpretational issues are there, Ethical Standard Board has taken the decision. For example, this Board of Studies issue, which was discussed, Cooperative Bank Director issue, which was discussed, and Ethical Standard Board has taken specific decision on that. So you can find that book also on website, Ethical Standard Board decisions. So that will also, in addition to disciplinary decisions, this decision also will be helpful to you.
And also you can tell about that one, sir, if you have 1 or 2 minutes regarding that transfer pricing, documentation and audit. If you
No, this decision is coming up in the next meeting.
Next meeting. Okay, sir.
Transfer pricing documentation. What is that called? Transfer pricing study.
Study and certification.
Whether statutory auditor can do transfer pricing study or not. We had a huge deliberation on that for at least 1.5 or 2 hours on that. And we were not able to conclude it properly. And we are again coming up with this in this meeting discussion on that. With international, we have now studied the international provisions also, and with respect to that, we'll be definitely discussing this.
Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot for.
Let me tell you, all my friends, Cotha ji is also here. There is a lot of technical work in Central Council. Why I'm telling is because in Bangalore you have your local members. At times we feel that why we have to travel and all those things. This Ethical Standard Board meeting actually runs for a day. So it is complete discussions are there and perspective which perhaps individually we think, collectively when we sit, there's a complete different perspective angle is given to that. Right, that tendering guidelines, I famously tell that tendering guidelines, I remember that in April 2016, we sat in 10 o'clock in the morning, we ended up in 1 o'clock in the night.
Oh my God.
And the guidelines are only 1-page guidelines. So that's how it is. But definitely we can raise the issues, we can ask the questions to Ethical Standard Board, we'll definitely tackle it.
I really understand, sir, post-COVID, Central Council members, SRC members and branch members they have become so aggressive. The mode of virtual also has joined for this. Earlier used to go physically, at least when you doesn't go, used to peacefully sleep or practice. Now virtual not allow you to. Entire day you'll be having a meeting after meeting. I feel even when you come back to native place also you'll be having virtual meetings. That's what I can see when Kotha sir also. Fully attached to that tab they have given.
Correct.
Thank you, sir. Hello. Thanks a lot for a detailed discussion and clarifying so many doubts. Really excellent session. I thank both of you for a great session, sir. Thanks a lot. I thanks on behalf of Bangalore branch of ICA for your time and efforts sharing a valuable knowledge, sir. Thank you. I also thank all the members for actively participating, raising so many questions.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all, sir.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.
Chairman, if you want further meetings, if you feel physically also, we may organize and we can invite Mangesh to come to Bangalore and address the members.
We love to meet Mangesh, sir. Whenever you come to Bangalore, please come, sir.
No, we have to call him to Bangalore. We have to call him specifically for Bangalore and we will come. Maybe you can plan for this and also on valuation.
Done.
That's
No
half a
problem.
day, you can do it.
Thank you, sir.
Feel that when we can do it.
Okay. Chalo.
Thank you. Thank you. Good night, all of you. That's
Yeah.
that material, sir. PPT.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm sharing that. I'll ask Ashish to share.
Okay, send it to me also. Thank you.